Welcome, everyone. I'm Dr. Stephen Greer. I'm the founder of the Disclosure Project. I'm an emergency doctor, retired now, emergency medicine and trauma. I have been working in this area for about 33 years as a volunteer and as a provider of information to people in the United States government. You're seeing behind me a moment ago this event 22 years ago on May 9th, 2001. At that event, there were 22 folks who came forward, and that information is all on our website and on YouTube, and those were folks who actually, some of them, who handled extraterrestrial bodies called EBINs, extraterrestrial biological entities, handled craft, were on retrieval teams, all kinds of witnesses. Now, that got a certain amount of attention in Congress, but they weren't ready at that time to do hearings, which they're preparing for. I understand from people in the House Government Reform and Oversight Committee. And so over the last 16 months, I've been asked to provide as much intelligence as I can to folks who have been working to get to the bottom of this since the Congress passed a law requiring the Director of National Intelligence to come forward with information to the extent that he had it. Now, one of the problems with that process is that, and I discovered this in 1993, in December 13th of that year, when I briefed the director of the CIA at the time, R. James Woolsey, for then President Clinton. He and the president had been waved off and not given information on this subject. That's when, as a young doctor, I realized that this was being run outside appropriate oversight and supervision by the Office of the President and the Congress, and that is just a fact. So at that point, of course, it sort of upended my life in many ways, but we began to try to get information to the executive branch further, do research, provide whistleblower testimony, but it was all done very quietly. I then started providing information to folks in the Congress, such as Representative Dan Burton, who was chairman of the Government House Reform and Oversight Committee, Senator Dick Bryan, Nevada, ironically, home of Area 51, on the Senate Intelligence Committee, and many others. Those proceedings went forward as a volunteer effort, and all of this is still a volunteer effort. We're unfunded volunteers. And I do want to thank every one of the people here who made this happen, all these military whistleblowers coming forward, and our staff, and most of them my wife, Emily. I will tell you, if my wife, Emily, hadn't been a rock, we wouldn't be here. She's amazing. So, we got married 44 years ago in August, this coming August. So, and we have 4 kids, 12 grandkids. So, ironically, my grandkids are the ages of my daughters when I started this process. So it's beautiful, but like, really? Why is this taking so long? So in my young years, I thought, okay, we'll get this information to the president and key people in the Congress. I'll go back to my normal life, taking care of shootings and stabbings and what have you, and off we go. Well, that didn't happen, as you all know, or you would have known. And I think the media has played a very key role recently in covering this, and there are whistleblowers beginning to come out in other settings besides this, and I applaud them, and I think more should do so. Now, the history of this is important because if you look at the testimony we have already, it's something like 70 to 80 people that we have debriefed, videotaped, have their transcripts, and it's available to the media and the public through our website and our YouTube channel. We've very transparently put out everything we can. To an extent, a not-for-profit entity can do it with volunteers and no office and no staff. So I don't want people to not get too grand here. This has been a volunteer effort for 33 years, and those people are heroes, as are these men up on the stage with me today. Now, and just a quick trip through some of the previous witnesses. We had Sergeant Clifford Stone. He was on an NBC team, nuclear, biological, chemical, back in the 60s, was actively involved in retrieving extraterrestrial vehicle and bodies, what have you. They were called EBINs, extraterrestrial biological entities. We have his testimony. It's there for anyone to see. We have people like John Callahan, who was the top accident investigator at the FAA when the Japan Airlines event happened in the 1980s during the Reagan years, and they tried to cover it up. He took the original FAA tracking tapes. The Disclosure Project have the originals, and you're welcome to see them. Those of you in the media, we can try to get those to you. So all of these sort of testimonies and witnesses have come forward already. But now we're at the stage where there's real utility, because the official law now is that the government has mandated the Pentagon, the intelligence community, to research this and report back to Congress. Now, there's a problem we'll get into in a moment with that whole process, which is important that you understand, and particularly the media understand. But first, I want to tell you what we've handed off this week to the Congress and to the White House and to the Pentagon AARO office, the AARO office that's tasked with investigating this. So we can go to the list of the material in the archive. It has government documents in the tens of thousands from all those countries: United States, Canada, Australia, Russia, Soviet Union, United Kingdom, and others. We have 145 top secret facilities, some of which are black sites, that are named and on a map, and you'll see them in a moment. The supporting documentation of it are in the archive, meaning the witnesses' testimony, who they were, when they were there, where the locations is, sometimes up to where the gate is. And that's been handed over to the United States government this week. There are 752 and counting whistleblowers who've come forward over the years. Some of them are now deceased. But what's important, even the ones who are deceased, if you go to their history and their command and what they provided, there is an investigative thread to follow back in. Very important. There are also files with all these witness testimonies that have been provided up to date. In the archive are 121. We learned of another one last night from a very high-level whistleblower who is not ready to come forward. So there's actually 122 crash retrieval cases of these UAPs. And those are documented. Michael Schratt, who is an aerospace historian and is working full-time with us beginning in November, had worked for Lockheed, but not the Skunk Works, on conventional operations. And he is doing those investigations for us, and also the beautiful illustrations of what these witnesses have had to share, and you will see those. Then we also have the documents that includes names of witnesses. In other words, government documents that are not declassified that we have. Now, we'll get into this in a minute. And there are many so-called deep throats who provide intel on the background, who are working with us, some of whom are very senior in these operations. Others are people who have just incidentally been involved. Okay, next. So this is just a thumb, pictures of all these guys that we already have come forward. They're there for you to see. They run from NASA folks and all that. It's in the YouTube channel. It's in the archive. Those were done, all these were up to 2001. So we're talking a long time ago, but those exist. It's perhaps a tree that fell in the woods a lot of you didn't know about. Next. And I want to go through this very quickly. This is just a scrolling list of the witness list. Each one of these witnesses has a file where they have either been interviewed or provide intelligence and corresponded with me, and that I have debriefed personally over the last 30 years. So you're going to see this goes on for about 100 named persons, and then it becomes a black list. It just has to be blacked out. Why? I'm not holding anything back except what I've been requested to by people whose confidence I have told them I will keep. So I'm a medical doctor. We understand patient, doctor confidentiality, like an attorney understands that. But until these guys want to be unmasked and come forward, we will not disclose their names, except the redacted list is something available to the media and to the public now. In addition to that, and it's very important, the unredacted list and the full files, including all my correspondence files, are in the unredacted archive. It's about, let's see, isn't it cool that you can put terabytes on something like this? This is all it is, but it's about a terabyte. We have about 8 terabytes of information. We're in the process of scanning it and trying to put it into a searchable database. This has been provided to the intelligence community, as I mentioned, the Pentagon, Congress, and the White House. It is also the redacted version would be available to the media if you can help us get it on a hard drive. We're really not funded properly, and each of these costs several $100s, so we gave it 1,000 of them. It's more than we've ever had. But nevertheless, it is an open archive. Eventually, we want to have it on an internet site, but the names that you're seeing now, you're going to see all their information is blacked out, and it's because they've asked not to be named. Now, they can be known by people who are working in a SCIF and have a vault, and who have the ability to then pursue it in the interest of national security. That has been provided to these key offices. So I just wanted to give you that as sort of an overview of how the list was constructed. It is by no means complete. We have a new whistleblower coming forward every week or two now at this point. And Michael Schratzer nodding his head. Yeah, this has become a torrent. And so we want to set up a mechanism. We're recommending that you'll hear what our recommendations are for the President and Congress to resolve this crisis. Next. So I wanted to mention that these bases, if you look at them, let's go to, this is where all these illegal operations have happened. I'm saying illegal because we can prove that this information, as Senator Inouye said, you'll hear his statement in a moment, has been run by a very shadowy, deep black operation, and we're not talking the legal black budget of the United States. We're talking about projects that presidents and CI directors and secretaries of defense and members of the Congress who have a need to know and are cleared TSSCI in SCIFs, secure compartmented information facilities, have been blatantly either gaslit, denied access. That is the foundation of everything we've done, is that these projects are a priori illegal and therefore unconstitutional and have to be reined in, because not doing so is a threat to the national security. So here is your list. I'm not going to go through 145 sites. Some of them are black sites. Some of them are bases you know about, like Wright-Patterson, Edwards, Nellis, Area 51, so-called. But all of them are based on witness testimony and intelligence we've gathered over the last 30 years, and it's time for it to be disclosed. And so now you have it. Next. Here's one, and people go out in the Mojave Desert. Michael Schratt took this picture when it was okay to fly near it in a small private plane. It is a site for the Lockheed Range underground entrance. What's in there? Well, there are man-made, and this is the big story, no one's telling you. A large number of the UAPs are in fact deep black budget electrogravitic, electromagnetic field propulsion devices based on the study of extraterrestrial vehicles that began in the 1940s. That is a fact, and we can prove it. So when you see these sort of places, just remember many of them, I want to be careful what I'm saying here. Someone who is in charge of the black budget of the United States in 2022 and went out to the Lockheed Skunk Works based on some information he had. He was shown a bunch of old jet aircraft. He knew he was being gaslit, and they reached out to me and I said, what do you want? I'll give you everything we have. And that's what's happened over the last 16 months. So I cannot name this person, but they're a wonderful person of enormous integrity and a hero of our country. So I want to just go through quickly some of the new ones who aren't here. Now, the reason these have initials, they're waiting to be cleared for coming forward publicly. They're afraid. Let me explain to you why they are. This man, here's just his incoming letter. We get these every day. Now, he's afraid he'll lose his pension. He signed an 80-year non-disclosure agreement. He has been threatened, and some of these have seriously had their lives threatened. It's a very thuggish situation going on that the Department of Justice and FBI need to drill down on very quickly. Next. Here's an illustration of one event that he was involved in back when there was a extraterrestrial vehicle that crashed and then ultimately ended up at Lawton, Oklahoma, near Fort Sill. This man has been in a skiff with these objects. These illustrations are based on his direct testimony and hours of discussions since 2016. Here is a small extraterrestrial body, about 39 inches long, that was retrieved in that operation. There are extraterrestrials of various sizes. The last known count I had of different civilizations involved with this, about 60 to 70 in that range, and I think there could be more. Next. This is one of the underground command centers that he was assigned to from the Pentagon. He was with Technical Management Office and then some other offices and investigated some criminal activities that occurred with a 3-star general related to this subject that the Department of Justice was basically unable to prosecute because they were denied access to the operations. Next. Here's one that was also in this another facility as an extraterrestrial vehicle. He actually was there very close to it. This gentleman wants to come forward. He needs to be protected, and this is why we're calling for explicit witness protection and explicit pension and asset protection for these whistleblowers. Next. And this is just an indication of a type of electromagnetic system that actually can cloak any tank or any object that we've developed over the years, and he was read into this as well. Next. So there's another gentleman. I'm going to run through these very quickly. We'd be here for 30 hours if I didn't. I'm just giving you a tip of the iceberg, right? This is a guy who is at the Dugway Proving Grounds, very key facility, MS we call him. He worked for C. Martin Corporation, a contractor, and he was in a facility that had an extraterrestrial vehicle that was being studied by scientists. He knows the chief scientist involved. He has named that individual to us, and they can all be subpoenaed now. So this object was there in 2009. He didn't know the date of acquisition, but he thought it was fairly recent. Next. He also was read into and had the chief scientist show him the location, which we now have, of a DUM, Deep Underground Military Base, that is in the Dugway sector, so-called Avery sector, A-V-E-R-Y, and it has huge capacity for parking. You go in, and there's a vast underground complex in that location. That location has been handed off to investigators with the U.S. government. Next. This gives an illustration of the size of this. You could put easily on the platform that goes down the Air Force One. It's a very large elevator, goes down underground. Next. And then we have this gentleman. He was not long ago in the Nellis Range in the Nevada test site north of Nellis Air Force Base, and he, next slide, was on a retrieval team. Now let me explain how this guy got involved. He was recruited out of Fort Campbell to be somebody to be on a retrieval team with a top secret clearance to pick up when we have an accident with a helicopter or jet, because there's classified technology on those often. And our YouTube pilot here will explain that perhaps. But the point is, he went from there, and that was preparatory to being on a retrieval team for this. So he was involved with this operation. It was a man-made, so-called alien reproduction vehicle, it's called by some people, or AT. A lot of people just call them advanced technology. It's a euphemism. But it's based on studying the electrogravitics and magnetic field propulsion systems of the interstellar vehicles that involve the science of quantum entanglement and, going, basically you want to go from one point in space and to another, say this is one point, this is another. You're not going through a straight line, you're folding space-time. That's how you do it. And we're not going to do a physics lesson here, Had enough of that in pre-med. But anyway, so this is an object, and I'm not a physicist, we have a physicist here. But this object was retrieved because it became disabled. Some of these retrieval operations are not extraterrestrial, but they would like sometimes the public to think maybe it was, because the bigger secret, I will tell you right now, is not the extraterrestrial issue. It's these technologies, which an unsupervised and frankly illegal operation have, which is a threat to the national security, period. This we will prove. And this is a bigger threat, the existence of these in the hands of unsupervised operations that have escaped the oversight of the President of the Office of the President and the Congress since 1956 to 1960. Hence Eisenhower's speech, beware the military-industrial complex. This is actually what he was talking about. I know people who have since passed away, like our witness, Stephen Lovkin, who was at the White House with Eisenhower, who said point blank, the president lost control of these projects and that he was very upset and angry about it, but these projects became so compartmentalized that he no longer could control them. So this is one. You can see there are rivets and what have you. And we'll go through this later after our fine gentlemen and whistleblowers speak. But I want to give you this overview really quickly. Next. So this is actually an extraterrestrial vehicle, a very large one that was at the Nellis North Range. We have the location of the helipad. It's Delta Force manned. This occurred back in that same era, around 2009, about 65 feet across. It's seamless, but it has sort of a clamshell part of it. There was a ramp that rolled out, like he said, like a roll-up that came out of it. And there was a ARV above it that was headed in lock. It was an electromagnetic lock on this object. I think it was stunned, and that's how it was brought down. This is not infrequent. Not every day, but not infrequent. I said over the last 80 years, at least 122 have come down. So there are helicopters. He was on the team to pick up debris. This one was, of course, intact. It began to pulse and operate and came back to life, as it were. And the entire group that was there basically were put in some kind of a stasis electromagnetically. Sounds like science fiction, teleported back to the helipad instantly. But before that happened, he had this meeting with two of these extraterrestrial biological entities, a male and a female, and this is very accurate, according to the whistleblower who needs to come forward when there's adult protection. They had no pinna, the ears outside, and had no hair, and there was a male and a female, and it was made very clear to him by these beings that they were completely non-hostile. All extraterrestrial civilizations are non-hostile. If they were hostile, the technologies they have would have been made quite clear to us in August of 1945. We'll get to this in a moment. So this, later he had an event when he tried to leave that command where there was a fake, what's called a programmed life form alien. These have been used in what you hear in the fabled lore of abductions and stuff in the UFO lore. This is actually a man-made creature, but it's not living per se. It has a covering that's skin-like. It tried to take him with one of these ARVs in command, and some people camouflaged in the ground near his truck. After he got out of this command, he was disgusted with what was happening. He no longer wanted to be part of that project, but they weren't happy he left. I told him, it's a miracle that you lived to tell this tale. And so what happened is that his pickup truck went into sort of complete lock, motor died because of this man-made UFO, UAP. He opened the door because he saw this creature, which he thought was an alien. It's not. And he hit it, it fell, he kicked it, and it split open this outer, and he saw the integrated circuits and fiber optics and what have you. This man I've dealt with quite a bit. He was ready to come to the aero skiff. He had a nasty encounter with people who threatened him directly. This is recent. And so we have not been able to bring him to the Aero Pentagon briefing. Next. And this is one that came in 2009. We had a witness SL, we call him Coast Guard, and this is his incoming letter to me. the redacted information. And then he told us about an event off of Guam where his Coast Guard ship, which is a buoy servicing vehicle out there, was called in on a mutual assist. And he got there, and you'll see on the next picture, there was an extraterrestrial vehicle that we had downed but got lost in the deep waters there in the Marianas Trench. And it had gotten caught and tangled up in, oddly, a fisherman net from Japan, a trawler, big one, big trawler. And so they were called in to retrieve this. He went and did retrieve it. He was part of the crew that most of them went down quarters, but with blacked out windows, he was there above ground, took a very sharp object to try to scratch it, impenetrable, could not scratch it, could not penetrate it. These are very advanced metallurgy, nanomolecular material, interstellar vehicles. Next. So what's going on with this? All of you have seen over the last 4 or 5 years these footage come out and the Pentagon's confirmed are three-dimensional objects with sensors and what have you, the so-called tic-tac and others. Now, I've spoken to one of the pilots who chased these objects. You've seen it on CNN, 60 Minutes, all these places. What hasn't been told when this event happened in the early 2000s is that these objects, which you'll see in a moment, particularly one of them, we have matching top secret witness testimony of them being a man-made object that our jet pilots and military don't know exists. This is dangerous in terms of deconflicting operations. So let's go to the next and play this.
Dude, that is a fucking drone, bro. There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. Oh my gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Look at that thing, dude. That's not our LNS though, is it? It's not. That is the LNS, dude. Well, if there's like... Look at that thing. It's rotated.
This is the so-called tic-tac now.
Nickel 6-1 Tango Project. Oh, go ahead! Woohoo! Roger.
Now, of course, this has been called an unknown UAP, what have you. We can excuse the Pentagon and most of the military and the White House and the Congress for not knowing what this is, because the operations that have been building these are deep black illegal, and they are not disclosing it properly to the authorities in our constitutional democracy and republic. This is based on a sighting of a group of people. Is basically the same object in the 1960s, 1967. Let's go to the next slide. And it's sort of a sketch here, the so-called vintage steam boiler. These have been seen in multiple places around since the 1950s and 60s. Next. Here's one that's a very good color illustration of it. Notice the probes on it. Extraterrestrial vehicles do not have those. These electrostatic discharge objects. We're not going to get into all the physics of this. Our team understands it, and we're welcome to share that in a longer brief with media folks. And here's the 2004 off the coast of San Diego tic-tac. It's fundamentally the same object. Next. And here it is. We have a top secret whistleblower came forward a few months ago in 1991, so now we're talking quite some time ago, way before the 2004 event, that is offloading off a C-130, one of these UAPs, but it's actually a man-made one, and here you have the color illustration. This man is very afraid to come forward. He was warned not to, and at one point was told he would be, quote, executed. Next. So here's what we need to go through very quickly. It's a lot to unpack. This is not intended to be, we just did a 2-day conference right next door. The media are welcome to get that entire event with all the details for you if you wish to have it, or people get it to you. But basically, there are two types of these so-called UAPs, and I've said this. Some are extraterrestrial vehicles, ETVs, and some are ATs or ARVs, advanced reproduction vehicles or alien reproduction vehicles. People use different terms. The extraterrestrial groups are absolutely not hostile. However, screaming caps, they are increasingly concerned about human hostility and our weapon systems, which include nuclear and scalar, the so-called, Dr. Zahari shared this weekend, about what scalar electromagnetic fields are. But just to give you a sense of it, you all know what an electromagnetic pulse is. That's at the speed of light. The scalar systems are, instead of a wave, is a point that goes out longitudinally. Some call them longitudinal waves. These have been studied. Tesla talked about scalar systems. They have been weaponized, and those are the primary systems used to target and hit these electromagnetic field propulsion craft that cause them to fall like a rock out of the sky. You do not travel from another star system and cannot navigate a thunderstorm in New Mexico. That ain't gonna happen. So even at that point, these had been early systems. We have a FBI memo from a field agent that we released. It's now one of the most watched, viewed documents on the FBI website of the fact that a field agent at the Roswell, after Roswell, said to J. Edgar Hoover that a disk was downed because we had switched on a new radar system. So let me explain the euphemisms that are used in this field. Radar can track an aircraft by bouncing a wave off of the fuselage, but it also can have piggybacked an active system not to hit it. So you can have an active weapon system embedded in a radar system. So that's what began to be experimented with, and this is why from the mid-40s forward, there were a number of these downed objects that we've been able to document. If we've documented 122 of them, I suspect there have been multiple numbers of that. So what's very important about this, these technologies are unsanctioned. They are illegal operations, and this can be proven in any court of law, and we're about to launch a massive civilian RICO action, racketeer influence, corrupt organization action against the corporations and the individuals involved. These technologies would immediately solve the world's energy, environmental, and poverty problems. Why? These are what people call, a senior executive with a big Fortune 100 company contacted us. They're called, some people say free energy, but they're zero-point and quantum vacuum energy systems, pulling energy out of, let's call it the fabric of space-time. These begin to be developed. Tesla knew about this, so I think Elon Musk doesn't have a Tesla, he has a Musk. A real Tesla we didn't have to plug in. I'd have one little battery in it. But the point is that these technologies would have a huge revolutionary effect. Macroeconomically, there would be some losers, oil industry, public utilities, nuclear power, now wind, solar, surface roads eventually would be obsolete. So it's a very significant technological advance, and for nearing a century, they have all been withheld. We just released an educational documentary film you can all see called The Lost Century and How to Reclaim It. It's a 2-hour expose of this. I suggest everyone look at it if you have a chance tonight. So these organizations have also been targeting and successfully down the ET vehicles. The covert group has technologies to launch a convincing false flag operation detrimental to the national security. This was the chief topic of my briefing for 3-star General Patrick Hughes at the Pentagon during the Clinton years, because he was not read into this. There were some events that had happened where you could trigger a world war because your top folks in the Congress, the White House, the Pentagon, and CIA, many of them, if they're not part of this covert group, this deep black group illegally, they have no idea what's going on because of the nature of TSSCI, the hyper-compartmentalization that happened in the 50s. So these actions really are a threat to world security and national security, and they have to be reined in immediately. I want to choose my words carefully here. A clock, I understand, has been put on this getting resolved through hearings and other means, and by the end of this year, it needs to be resolved. And that's all I will say at this point. So these actions really are dangerous. They are crimes against humans worldwide. We're going to get into that. And some of these crimes need to be referred to the International Court. Some of them involve, as you'll hear from our attorney, crimes against humanity. We applaud the current actions of the Congress and the President to sign the bill to get to the bottom of this. They have very courageously stepped forward. We're trying to get them everything they would need to know. And I will tell you, the Disclosure Project Intelligence Archive literally has everything they would need to know to get to the absolute end of this. It's been handed to them. So the chief characteristics of this illegal secret government called ISG projects, the CIA folks and Pentagon people and most of the people in the government are victims of this. They're not culpable. When people say, why is the government hiding all this? Well, the government is very complex and it's highly compartmentalized. These operations have been run by a clandestine, unsanctioned group. And therefore, our military and our intelligence community and our political leaders are, in fact, victims of this secrecy. I want to refer very briefly to one of the very first CIA director, Admiral Roscoe Hillenkoetter, who in 1961 wrote to the New York Times and said, the secrecy around UFOs is a threat to the national security, not the UFOs. So what has happened is it's all been turned on its head, where they're trying to say, UAPs are a threat. Well, the man-made ones are. The extraterrestrial ones aren't. This has to be made crystal clear to the American people so we don't stumble into an absolute disaster of epic proportions. So these operations that I've been referring to in the United States, we have parallel projects in Australia at Pine Gap. There are projects in the United Kingdom. These are all very sub rosa, off the radar. I have done briefings for the Minister of Defenses of Australia, Canada, and the Great Britain. None of them were read into these projects, and yet we had evidence they were ongoing. So they also act without acknowledging any national boundaries. What do I mean by that? So we have an operational facilities in other countries that we move in and out of with alacrity, without any knowledge or approval of that government. So this is also not good, obviously, and dangerous. But because of the nature of our operations, which can be cloaked, that have these AT or ARV vehicles, they can move off radar, they can go in and out of areas, and we have witnesses who can prove what I just said. Blackmail, bribery, and intimidation is the stock in trade, and it's the operational core of this illegal secret government program. Many of our whistleblowers have been threatened and have been blackmailed, and in the case of some of us, attempts at bribery, including myself. Next. So these are the actions we recommend immediately, now that this is all coming out by the Congress and the government. Next. And I want to remind everyone who's in office, and all military know this, I do solemnly swear to affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which I am about to enter, so help me God. Next. So this is quite a list. I want to go through it very quickly. These have been conveyed over to the government in various offices. This investigation of the UAP issue, based on the intelligence archive, should happen immediately and be increased in its pace and scope. The presidential executive order needs to occur immediately to stand down all targeting of these extraterrestrial vehicles by these covert projects, because it is dangerous and it is an existential threat to security for the entire world, not just our country. The executive order requiring all military intelligence contractors and other agencies of the U.S. government to disclose to Congress and White House all information, materiel, and technologies and locations and related assets. If not complied with, within around 6 months, we think that the offending party should be prosecuted criminally for treason and other crimes against the United States. The executive order we need an executive order where the State Department and Pentagon coordinate a global diplomatic as opposed to military response to these extraterrestrial civilizations. Should have happened. Barry Goldwater, Senator Goldwater told me it was a, excuse my language, goddamn mistake then and goddamn mistake now that this was ever kept secret like this. He was not allowed in this project. When he tried to get in, General Curtis LeMay told him he could never ask him about it again. We have that whole trail with former Senator Goldwater. So we also need to have an executive order so that the U.S. Patent Office that has seized these zero-point and related technologies under bogus application of the national security laws, and we have a copy of an inventor who had one of these happen to him. Those have to be reversed, those patents have to be released, and inventors and scientists around the world that have come across these, look, the laws of the universe are universal, and they've been discovered by folks, they get grabbed, they're either put on a black shelf or they get this national security order slapped on them. Those have to be reversed and those should be released open source to the public. We also need an executive order to immediately require that the U.S. Space Force and Pentagon coordinate assets with the State Department, the United Nations, and other governments to initiate further open communication with these civilizations. The Space Force could be very useful in this regard if it's deployed properly. All of the military would be very important. And I want to emphasize, both the people who work in most of these corporations and in these agencies and the Pentagon have no knowledge excuse me, of these illegal operations. And we should not paint them all with the brush of being culpable. It's not. These are the rogue elements. An executive order to immediately disclose advanced energy generating technologies should happen. These are held by some of these corporations and agencies. This would, within 10 to 20 years, end all pollution on Earth and all global poverty. This is not a pipe dream. Those technologies are extant. They have been around for a while, and we need them, and we need them 60 years ago, 70 years ago. Next. So, you know, these are going to continue, and we don't have time to go through all of these. So the reason I'm going through these is that there's a specific action plan that we have. You can read these. They'll be in the press briefing materials if you need them. And I think it needs to happen very quickly because this is all going to come out, and there needs to be an organized response. Next. The congressional recommendations, Congress should immediately pass a $50 billion research bill to develop and bring forward the safe technologies related to zero-point and quantum vacuum energy systems. We provided 50-some billion for the chip industry. This is way more important. And frankly, it needs to come out very, very soon, given what we're facing with the climate and global poverty issues. That's something that needs to be put on the front burner. It is certainly a more important agenda than the partisan bickering that we see today. Amnesty provisions need to be passed explicitly for people wanting to come forward. I have a major number of folks who are executives, corporate, also whistleblowers, some of whom have been involved in activities that are not legal. If they come forward, they should have immunity so that this can all be unwound in an orderly and peaceful way. That needs to happen very quickly, and it should be included in a bill this year. The Congress should also convene open hearings on this. I understand from discussions with a member of the House Government Reform and Oversight Committee that this has been discussed by the chairman and the Speaker of the House. I think that should be put on the front burner and move forward very quickly. We will provide all information, and have already provided all information they will need. There are, I'm sure, other archives that can be brought to bear, and other whistleblowers are now going to be coming forward, probably several a week at this point. Congress should also pass legislation to explicitly protect the personal safety, like a witness protection program. It is not an exaggeration to say that in the 30-some years I've been dealing with this, I have dealt with multiple people who have been flat out threatened with execution. One of them is sitting here at this table, perhaps more. Next. So this, next slide. One of the things I just want to mention is the Lost Century was crowdfunded, and look at the subtitle, How to Reclaim It. Because there's a century of technological and scientific progress that would greatly benefit all of humanity, not just the United States. We all live on this beautiful sphere floating through space together. It needs to very much come forward. It's 100 years is long enough for secrecy. Next. So I want to introduce someone I've gotten to know. We first met some last year. By the way, all of these military guys have been, and corporate folks have been to the Aero SCIF, the Secure Compartment Information Facility. The Disclosure Project has funded all of this for their personal needs and travel. That's why we appreciate your donations and contributions. But Colonel Heckert, he is a retired and very decorated United States Air Force Command pilot. During his extensive career, Colonel Heckert flew over 100 combat reconnaissance missions, including 11 years in high-altitude aircraft developed by the Lockheed Skunk Works. These were not the alien reproduction vehicles, such as the U-2 and the TR-1, and flew alongside the famed SR-71 Blackbird. In the late 70s and early 1980s, Colonel Heckert commanded the nation's largest nuclear monitoring facilities and radiological processing lab, and was responsible for the airborne collection of debris from nuclear explosions worldwide. Later, he was commander of classified operations in the Middle East and subsequently served as a special project director at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, where he was involved with countless classified development operations. Colonel Heckert also spent time working out of Groom Lake, Area 51, where he conducted flight operations and project management, evaluation, and research. Please welcome my friend and hero of our country, Colonel Heckert.
Please. Well, thank you for being here and listening. I need to establish just a couple facts. I've been involved with SCI vaults and code words since 1964, and my last access with the Air Force and other agencies was 1967. For the last 8 months, I've been involved again in SCI discussions, thanks to this gentleman and all of these people sitting next to you and all of those volunteers. The things I want to share are first just a little bit of historical information quickly. You know the name Kelly Johnson. Kelly Johnson and the gentleman, Ben Rich, who succeeded him, I got to know very well. I've got a 1953 UFO report signed by Kelly Johnson and his engineers, and in that same UFO thing, about 4 hours later, it appears over his house. And Dr. Greer has a letter that Kelly Johnson sent to the National Director of Intelligence saying, this is real, this needs to be investigated. I am very fortunate to have been a pilot. I've got over 7,000 hours of time. I currently live in Alaska with my wife, Alice, and a whole bunch of grandchildren, and that's a real blessing. The two documented encounters, and I'm sorry that, do they have that up on the screen, or are they just showing that on? I'll make sure it's available, but these are the two airplanes that I flew that had UFO encounters. The first one was during the latter stages of the Vietnam War. I was flying an operation called Linebacker 3 going into Laos. I was in an orbit at 14,500 feet just south of the Laotian border, and my two armed escorts, because the RF is unarmed and they're there to protect me, were delayed on takeoff. So I'm doing just a racetrack type of orbit. There are things that monitor in warfare called GCI sites. These are radar sites that vector in the fighters to the people that are intercepting you. What happens next is that I get an alert from 3 GCI sites and the early foreman AWACS that I've got traffic that is a fast mover near Mach 1 coming out of North Vietnam, Laos, heading for me in orbit. That concerns me because my armed escort isn't there. Now I'm completing about halfway down this next pathway, and they tell me, oh, don't worry, that target is above 70,000 feet, and you know it can't get at you at this point. So I'm a little relieved, but then I finally get to see it, and it's on a wavelength of light that I've only seen one other place, and that is in a nuclear pile on an active nuclear power generation, and it's called Teller light. It is very unique, very white, very, very bright. So we look up, and it's an 11 o'clock, and over here off my left shoulder, about 10 o'clock. My backseater is stumbling to make their emergency detection systems and our defensive systems active. We watch this thing, and it's way above there, and I'm a little relieved until all of a sudden, through the mid-term of the orbit, it comes from 70,000 feet down to 12,500 feet in 2 seconds. And now it's tracking off my nose and staying at 5 nautical miles away. That sets off everything in my aircraft. The 3 GCIs and the AWACS are really concerned about me at this point. And as we go on parallel with this thing flying at 5 miles an hour, I'm really concerned. And then they ask me, will you intercept this if you can? Well, the airplane, the RF-4C, is a Mach 2 plus airplane. I've been in flight for a little while, and so I've probably, if I go to afterburner, only have about 15 minutes of fuel left. But I agreed to intercept. The reason I did was I have a new, one-of-the-kind IR infrared sensor, but it's on the bottom of the airplane. So my backseater and I agree, hey, this is important. We can see this. We need to document it. I go to afterburner, and we accelerate very quickly through Mach 1, go up to about Mach 1.2, and I close to within 3 nautical miles of this UFO. And we've got it now on our radar. We've got it pegged. The guy in the back seat can't see it on his display because that sensor's pointing down. So I pitch up, do a supersonic climb up, and he says, we got it, we got it, we got it. That white light at 3 miles goes out of sight within less than 2 seconds. And they say, don't worry about it. It's above 80,000 feet in those 2 seconds. I go back to the home base because I'm out of fuel, land, all that material, all the mission material is confiscated, and I'm told, don't talk about it. Well, what happens next is I'm not happy with that answer because I've seen something very, very real. I call the GCI site on what's called the Audubon or telephone system. I say, hey, I'd like to talk to the senior controller that was on duty, tell him I was a UFO pilot that they were just controlling, And he comes on the phone and says, hey, we're all really excited about this. And then I hear him say, yes, sir. Okay. He says, bye. Click. I couldn't talk to the other two GCI sites, and that goes away, and I never know anything about it until later. The next one is on a U2R, and that's a blackbird. I'm at 70,000 feet above that on the DMZ of Korea. This has been a combo mission, which means I'm taking photo intelligence during the daylight, and I'm doing what is called an ELINT comment mission in a butterfly track 3 miles off the DMZ. We have a sunshade that protects you during the daytime in the U2 because the sunlight's so intense. You're about above 98% of the atmosphere at that point. Anyway, I have that slidden back, everything's looking good, and all of a sudden I am blinded by that same frequency light from above. It turns my black airplane white. And the U2, as the last ditch saving method to avoid a missile, can do a turn at less than 7 nautical miles at the same altitude the SR-71 is at. SR-71 takes 160 miles to do that same U-turn. There is nothing, to my knowledge, in the world that is man-made that can stay with the U-2 at that altitude turning the max turn unless it's another U-2. This light tracks me from above. Now, I can show you later missiles that come between me and my other RF-4. My airplane's got holes in it. They never made me abort a reconnaissance operational mission. This scared me so bad that I had to abort. But when I land, normal debrief does not take place. They just say, go shower and go to your room. Okay. So what happens next in my career is that because of my wife's concern, she says, hey, we got to take a respite of this. By the way, she worked at Air America at Udorn Air Force Base in Thailand for the CIA. Anyway, she says, we got to get out of this. You know, you're getting a little too tense, and now we have 2 children, and I'm worried. So I take an assignment to what's called AVTAC, and AVTAC was established in its predecessor in 1945 due to the development and the concern of Little Boy and Fat Man, the 2 nuclear bombs. Those are important because we have a detailed history of air sampling, pollution sampling, and it was primary pollution that they were concerned about radiologically from 1945 on. At that point, I'm assigned at a base commander level. I have sites all over, and I'm sorry I can't show you a slide of that, but we're involved in things like the raising of K-129. It's a video that's been put out about 5 years ago that shows my site at Attu detected the breakup of that submarine. That same site at Attu and my seismic site will sense a nuclear underwater, deep underwater test out of South Africa, and that's called the Vela, V-E-L-A incident. And my boss at headquarters is fired over that incident, but 2 years later, because the administration denied that that test ever took place, the Vice Chief of Staff of the Air Force, General Mathis, the Chief Scientist for the White House, and the Secretary of the Interior come to my vault, and they want a briefing on our data and if we really think that that happened. They left believing it really happened, and as a result, South Africa destroys 4 nuclear warheads they had. Israel will never admit that they were part of that joint venture. From there, I go to Europe as one of the first 4 in the TR1 program, and through just accidental events again, because of the sickness that our intel officer goes through, I'm the only one that has a code word clearance. And so I'm assigned to do his duties while he recovers, and I'm exposed to all of the peacetime aerial reconnaissance data in Europe and Africa. I'm in charge of scheduling those events and trying to get us integrated with the TR1 into the peacetime aerial program in the European theater. From there, this is supposed to be a 4-year assignment. At the 14th month of my tour in Europe, I am required to, or I was asked, do I want to fly a high flyer again? And of course I said yes. They do a process when you go to a classified site called sheep dipping. And so they put fictitious orders in your official files. I go overseas and work in the Middle East and actually work with Delta Force on a hijacking in June of 1985 during that tour, and we lost a soldier on the ramp. But this is in direct coordination with MI6 because it's a British base, and that's now declassified. But it was quite an experience. The only problem is that there was a conflict in the chain of command. I was supposed to be the chief test pilot for the U-2 program back at Edwards. That's a follow-on assignment they promised me. Instead, that assignment's canceled. I'm held in that remote location for 10 days. My wife was about to disown me, and I am told I'm going to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. The new job for the first 6 months is Director of High Altitude Test for the Air Force. The next job, and this is through the end of my career, is the Program Director for the U-2, TR-1, SR-71, and other advanced classified programs. I need to transfer to this and tell you about a recovery that we did called Project Morning Light. It is a reconnaissance satellite that comes down, and eventually parts of it end up in Grave Slate Lake, and there's radioactivity that's cleaned up from that. That also involves a U-2, or pardon me, a UFO. The other thing I want to just share with you is the 3 events in Area 51. And those events themselves are first a security breach, and the reason I'm there is because some of my funds in my black programs, and I was required to justify that black budget to the House and Senate Select Intelligence Committee on a quarterly basis. Some of those funds are not being spent. My projects aren't going forward. I'm there, and I overhear 2 people talking about using Navy sensors to photograph an aerial vehicle that's flying at night, and they're going to make a lot of money. Well, I report that immediately. Those people are arrested, and I don't know anything more about that event, except none of that imagery they took got released. The next one is that I have a number of cost overruns in my projects. I'm back, and I look, and I'm finding that other programs are using my funds diverted for their use, and that's what's slowing my developments, and I'm very upset about it. The last part, and this is, gosh, I'm sorry I'm having my senior moments, if you'll forgive me. but I will let you, but I'm available afterwards. I'm sorry I've taken so long. I know this is a tiring briefing.
Thank you. A real hero. Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel Heckert. There's a lot more. I said each of these witnesses have stories to unpack from, for example, Area 51 and what have you. It would take hours, but I want to give you a sense that this is really the tip of the iceberg. These represent 0.5% of the Disclosure Project witness list. So the next gentleman I'd like to introduce has become a figure of great support for us. He's a Marine who in 2009 in Indonesia had a direct encounter with one of the man-made operations, and he is Michael Herrera. He has very courageously come forward. The first time he contacted me, because I know of these sort of operations that he came across on his mission, I told him that every single person I knew who knew about what he had seen had not lived to tell this story. He is enormously courageous. Thank you, and welcome to Michael Herrera.
Well, thank you all for being here. What I'm about to tell you hasn't been something that I've disclosed until recently in the help of Dr. Greer, among other people, so I appreciate your help with this. In 2009, my unit, which was most decorated infantry battalion in the entire Marine Corps, which was 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines, was called in to do humanitarian assistance operations out in the Philippines, which was Operation Quetzana, which we were attached to the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit, which conducts maritime operations all throughout Southeast Asia, in conjunction with the 7th Naval Fleet, which houses one landing helo deck, or LHD, among LPDs, which is what I was on, called a USS Denver. Ironically, that's where I'm from, so kind of felt like home. Now, during that operation in Quetzana in the Philippines, they had actually heard that a tsunami and earthquake hit the western part of Sumatra, which is western Indonesia, Padang City more specifically. Out of all the ships in the 7th Fleet, the ship I was on was the only one that was routed to that location, which was oddly strange, but then again, this is my first humanitarian operation, so I don't know the logistics of it, but the skipper of the ship would probably know that information. So this happened September 30th. We ended up getting called and dropped anchor around October 8th. We are briefed in the ward room, which is the officers' mess, where they eat like their cafeteria per se. We're briefed that there is some of President Obama's family members that are present on either in the city or somewhere near there. They had a SEAL platoon that was ready to go to retrieve those people. Us knowing well that Indonesia is also the 2nd largest terrorist capital where they train these guys, and they'll send them up to whatever theater of operation where anybody wants a piece of the United States, they ship them up to go handle it. So we know that well, and we were then briefed that we were going to be armed during this operation, just to also provide security for the transportation coming to basically drop off medical supplies, sheltering items, food, purified water, things like that. So they ended up selecting certain Marines to go ahead and do this. We were only in sticks of six Marines, so it had NCOs on top of other Marines to help with that. So we again boarded CH-53 Super Stallions, which are gigantic helicopters that are roughly 100 feet long. I love the design of them. It's my personal favorite. But we ended up boarding this on the ship, and we flew to the southwestern part of the city, which is Padang. Looked a lot different through satellite imagery that I've recently seen. Back then is a lot different, especially because most of it was decimated, on fire, rubble, flooded, you name it, basically the worst kind of scenario you could ever see. From then, once we touched down on this landing strip, it took probably about 2 minutes. And then again, the pilots got radio confirmation to go ahead and drop us into certain parts. So we again dropped to a hasty LZ, which took probably about 6-7 minutes to fly to from that position. and we dropped to a hasty LZ. We got off the bird, and what we were instructed to do at that point through the briefing was to push to a high ground at least to get better observation. As a Marine, the tactical advantage that you get from having a observation from a top point is you see everything clearly. You could also coordinate from there. At that time, we had did a tactical column, which we are able to get eyes on pretty much everything, especially with 6 Marines, so we have the effective communication at that point. If we need to engage, we can properly do it within the amount of ammunition we've got, as well as the weapons that we got, which were only M16A4s. So at that point, we decided to push forward. We trekked up about 300 meters. At this time, I have a Panasonic camera that has the ability to take photographs. It has a ability to take videos, obviously. When we got to this high point, I was taking video camera, and I had actually turned to the north, which just kind of slopes down. And right there was something that stuck out like a sore thumb, especially with jungle terrain, things like that. Vegetation, very green stuff, was something that stuck out so well. It's always going to be basically imprisoned in my mind for the rest of my life, and it has been for 14 years, was something that was rotating, and it was transitioning between colors like a light matte gray as well as a dark matte black. So in between, that's what it kept, and it was very smooth. We had all looked at each other as we got online, and we decided to investigate. The further thing I want to say is that I actually took pictures and video of this before we actually trucked down. We had a dump pouch where we basically, if we expend ammunition, we want to retain our magazines, so we put those there. So I dropped my camera in there, and we decided to go down. We didn't have any communications, which was weird, and that was a very odd thing, and it's something that either could have been good that we didn't, or it could have been something that could have been very bad. And it just however you want to look at that. Once we got down this slope, we were approximately 150 meters away from this craft. When we all got to the point where we could see it, just like behind here, again, Mr. Schratt, phenomenal job. You can see that the craft here actually was roughly about 300 feet. And the reason why I know this is because you could fit 3 of the helicopters that we flew in on underneath this craft. It was rotating a clockwise motion. The panels here that you see, the black ones, at least 3 of them, was like a Vanta black, very dark. I have no idea what that was. On the very top, there was like a pyramid structure that you could see the shadowing of it, which would elicit that was a pyramid structure. And it had an audible hum to it. Kind of like a guitar amp if you were to unplug that, or like a transformer. It's very audible. If I was to hear that sound again, I could tell you, okay, it's probably this thing or something similar to that. It's very distinct. And the way that it was floating, which was about 15, 20 feet off the ground, it was kind of a very eerie thing to see because I've never seen anything like that in my life. When we got up to that point, we were then intercepted by a team of soldiers or rogue military force, if you will. The most concerning thing about this is they all had American dialects. They had American gear. They had OTVs, black. They had black camouflage. They had very similar setups to what we have, but more high speed, something what you would see special operation groups these days have. They had no insignias on. They had no ranks. They had nothing that would signify who they were. They had black ball caps. They had M4A4s that were equipped with ACOGs, which was a step up from what we were currently issued, as well as PEC-16 IR illumination devices that you use for night vision and night patrols, things like that. So we were engaged. We had 8 of them put the drop on us. You could audibly hear them blow the safety selectors off. They basically started screaming at us, telling us what we were doing, we were not allowed to be there, who were we with, what were we doing there, threatened that they could kill us right then and there. We could get lost in the jungle. They could throw us out of a helicopter if they needed to. It was very nerve-wracking at that point, especially looking to my fellow Marines and seeing the reactions on their faces too. We were all freaking scared, to say none the less. So with that being said, each Marine was then patted down along with myself. We had our weapons taken from us. They were basically cleared in condition 4, which means they had no round chamber, no magazine in. They dumped our magazines out of our mag pouches as well onto the deck. And then again, because of Marine Corps order, how things are with that, we were told to keep our military ID in our left breast pocket. So they knew that. They asked for our military identification. We gave it to them, obviously, because they have guns in our face. So provided that to them. They had something that looked like modern day smartphones, but this is 2009, so it's not really as high tech compared to obviously today. So they took some pictures of our military ID, and then they had something remind me of a BAT system, which is a biometrics tracking system that we would use. This is for insurgents or any things like that. It would take fingerprints, it would take retina scans, it would take pictures of them and document them. So if there's other militaries that were coming to relieve our post, they would actually have this information too to know who they are dealing with. That's what it reminded me of, and I had trouble scanning the IDs. As this is going on, we're going back between these guys as well as what's going on in the background. At that time, there was 4 of these trucks, which were F-350s. They were up-armored. They were pretty beefy. They had weapon cases that I've seen before because of something that we've actually loaded weapons into. They had 2 of them that were in the back of each truck. They also had these containers that was illustrated right here, which come to find out through recent revelations from yesterday from somebody who came forward to Dr. Greer. I don't know who they are, but what they had told him and what he has told me is that this gentleman knows exactly what these were used for because they had like a cylinder on the front, which is either for oxygen or what I hypothesized was for vacuum sealing, which lead me to suspect that they were smuggling narcotics or drugs. Come to find out it's more disturbing than that. This gentleman has first-hand account with this and says that it was for people. It's very disheartening, especially because that part of the world have already gotten ravaged, and it's something that is very hard to see right now because of what I've witnessed, and it's very disheartening. And this is why I'm up here. So they loaded these onto this platform that you can see right there, and as they got up there, like I said, I was going back and forth. These guys are still searching our stuff. They're still, pointing their weapons at us. And after the last 2 trucks that I saw that actually got onto that platform unloaded, they had 4 guys in each truck that would unload everything. However they did it, I can't tell you because, again, I was focused on this as well. And these trucks drove off. As that happened, this platform actually rose up off the ground itself. The top part of the craft actually met it down in the middle like this, and it formed into one solid piece. It floated right above the tree line. As soon as it was able to break that tree line, it actually had on the corners of each of these, which was an octagonal shape craft, by the way, on each corner it emanated a light. It was either red, yellow, green, or blue. Only those 4 colors I can distinctly remember. It didn't make any additional high-pitched sounds when it rose up. Once it got past that tree line, it shot over to the left, basically where the ocean was, at so fast, I would estimate probably 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 miles an hour instantaneous like that. There was no rotor wash, no exhaust that would disturb the trees, vegetation. The coconuts that were on these trees were not even touched. It produced no sonic boom. This thing was so fast. So as that happened, they basically had told us to turn around. As we turned around, kind of a couple things that went through my head at that point was that we're done. They actually started loading our magazines into our back into our vests in a way that would be hard to get them to put them into a weapon and to actually, charge the weapon and actually put it around in a chamber. So they put those in. They actually slung our M16s on their back for us, but when they did it, the Marine Corps not really issued the best gear, especially at that time. So the slings back then were, I would say, subpar quality, cut my neck pretty good, and they kind of went in that motion and made sure they were secured so we couldn't really get them as easy. And they escorted us back up this slope. And they told us we were not allowed to look back. 2, that we were not able to talk about this. They were actually, 2 of the guys were actually talking about either, hey, should we smoke these guys right now? That's what they kept saying. It was kind of feeding more into the fear at that point because, again, I don't know who these guys are. I know they had American gear. They had American sidearms as well. If these guys have actually taken an oath like we have, and then why they're going against people like us and even willing to kill servicemen who just even stumbled onto this, it just blows my mind, and it's very sick. So as we broke atop this hill, we decided to book it. And we ran back to the LZ. There was a gunnery sergeant that was attached to the ship. I don't know this gentleman personally, but I know he's very unhappy with seeing us because we had actually had our weapons slung. We were not combat effective at that point if we needed to be. He asked specifically why we were. We didn't tell him exactly why. We just came up with an excuse. And then we waited for the next CH-53 to approach, and we got on board, flew back to the ship. We turned our weapons in back to the armory. We took our gear off back in our berthing, and we went upstairs to be debriefed by an admiral that I've never seen before, and it was kind of somebody who was out of place. I don't know if he has any kind of relevance to this at all, but if that's the case, if he does, I hope he comes forward with that information. It would be very helpful. So as we're going to go ahead and fast track to a couple days later, which we end up in Subic Bay, which is like the party town in the Philippines. So we had 3 days there of liberty. The first night I come back, because we had to report back to the ship each night, we were not allowed to stay out in town. My rack was on my camera was on my rack, and the memory card that was in it was out, and my battery was out of the camera, missing as well. So all of that was missing. The only thing that was there was the camera. Mind you, I had my locker secured. I had other stuff that was basically piled on top of that camera. So whoever did it knew what the hell happened. So after that, the other thing that was also notable with that was each of the Marines that were with me also had their cell phones taken that they brought. Even though they didn't bring them on the mission, all their stuff was missing. The other stuff, the other people in the actual platoon never had their stuff touched. It was only us 6 that were affected. So fast tracking back when we returned back to Okinawa, one day I had got a call from the duty that was in the barracks. Each barracks has like a duty of Marines that are, making sure there's still order, things like that. He had been told that I needed to go up to the CP, so he informed me, so I had hightailed it up there. And oddly enough, there was nobody in the building, except for one gentleman who was wearing Air Force dress blues that was missing a name tag, which I understand in Air Force policy or regulations that they were supposed to wear a name tag, and he did not have that. I gave him the proper greeting of the day, gave him the salute. He had pulled me into an office, and he had said, "You are not allowed to tell anybody in your chain of command. I don't care if it's a general. I don't care if it's anybody. You are not allowed to talk about what happened. You can go to prison for this, or you could be killed." So he slid over a non-disclosure agreement, and it had 2 things that I can recall to this day as I quickly skimmed through it, because again, I had thought we were going to forget about this whole mess. And one was said TSSCI, and the other said Indonesia. There's only 2 things I can recall out of that. So I was forced to sign that. I signed it, and I had got the hell out of there as quick as I could. Before I did that, I tried to ask him who he was, and he would not tell me who he was. So I hightailed it back, and I have not spoken about it ever since I was able to recently because what the law passed. But that is my account for you guys. This is also an urging for anybody in Washington, D.C. who's a political figure. Please get this under control, because there are people who are either being hurt or killed by this, and it's something that needs to be addressed. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Heckert. I do want to share that also when we reached out to him, we have the names of the other 5 people in the platoon. Of course, these will not be disclosed because they have requested their names not be, but there's corroboration. One of them wrote to Mr. Herrera when we asked that Mr. Herrera reach out to the other folks involved in this horrible incident, which now is quite clear from other sources involves a type of human slave trade used in covert programs, very criminal operations. He said, "Hey man, this is asking too much, and it's not worth the risk. My family and military career far exceed anything you are asking of me. It's not worth my life or jeopardizing my family. I know we go back, but this is asking too much. You need to get out of whatever you are in, and don't get me involved with this mess. My career isn't worth helping you. Don't ever ask me to do this shit, excuse my language, again." This is from a Marine platoon member. Now, many of the people in the Disclosure Project Intelligence Archive are folks who have had that response because they need protection in their career. Some are still in the military. One I'm dealing with still has a TSSCI clearance who contracts with one of our agencies here outside D.C. So I think that this has to be dealt with in an orderly fashion immediately by the Congress and by the President. Next, I'd like to introduce Stephen Digna Jr. He's a U.S. Army veteran, disabled due to an incident. He also was a witness to a Raytheon Corporation event at Fort Irwin, California. His story is very involved. He's just going to give you a few of the highlights in the interest of time. But thank you very much. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to look down and read this. I have a brain injury, so it gives me problems. So I apologize. My name is Stephen Michael Digna Jr. Doctor, I'm sorry. These are slipping my hands here. Sorry. That's okay. My name is Stephen Michael Digna Jr. The following testimony is true and accurate as it can be at this time to the best of my ability, and I am prepared to swear this testimony under oath before the Senate and Congress. I'm a former sergeant in the United States Army. I began active duty service in 1999, and I served until 2002. I was assigned to the U.S. Army Training Center, W4J9 Alpha Alpha, Fort Irwin, California, located in the Mojave Desert inside Death Valley near the Barstow, California in 2000. I was assigned to Alpha Company Group, Live Fire Combat Engineer Division, Computer Support Systems, and basically for civilians it's management for live fire operations. I acted as a hub between the operations group, intelligence planners, ground team, Air Force, and Star Wars programs. Thank you, Doctor. In July of 2001, I was observing a live fire practice at a level from an observation deck at approximately 3 stories high from the desert floor. I saw a craft in the distance at approximately 200 feet off the ground, measuring approximately 172 feet across, strongly resembling a hovering B-2 Spirit. Upon first glance, my eyes were adjusting to the darkness. I could see 7 lights in a V-shape. After that, I closed my eyes for approximately 30 seconds to allow them to adjust to lighting conditions. We were running red lights throughout the bunker due to the current live fire exercise. The range was hot. That means rounds are being fired and lives are at risk at all times. This was interrupted by a very, very ominous call, a net call. It said, "Cease fire, cease fire, cease fire." It came from one of our observer controllers on the ground. There was about 27 teams out there. And they kept soldiers alive and trained them. Sorry, thank you, Doctor. Once my eyes adjusted, I could make out the general shape of the craft. There were 2 men from Raytheon present. I pulled out my night vision goggles to get a better look at the craft. It appeared to be generating 7 lights along its wings and underbelly. I noticed another smaller craft oriented on the right side and at the same height as the first craft, approximately 75 feet to 100 yards to its right. The second craft was jet black, V-shaped, pointed towards the first craft. This craft had equally joined, spaced, rectangular sections forming the hull. The craft had a gimbal rack that deployed from the bottom of the craft. Approximately 5 to 6 holographic lights, holographic emitting lights were pointed directly at the first craft. That was my assumption due to the fact that they were displaying a strange color within my NVG goggles. Anyone that knows the old school, circa 2000 NVGs, they don't emit color. They give you green, grays, and blacks. I was seeing colors within my night vision goggles. This was not normal. And it was my assumption that perhaps this was a hologram being projected from the other craft. I can't confirm that. However, that was my assessment at the time and my suspicion at the time. I wanted to throw a baseball at it, but I didn't have one, just to see if it was tangible and solid. The second craft was jet black, V-shaped. Oh, I'm sorry, jumped a little space here. Thank you for the bullets, Raven. The craft and the gimbal rack were deployed from the bottom of the craft and approximately 5 or 6 lights. Sorry, Dr. Greer. Guys, I goofed up, and that's a part of the brain injury suffered during an explosion on the live fire range. One of the 2 men on the observation deck from Raytheon noticed the night vision goggles I had. He went from chattering cheerfully. They were pretty relaxed. They'd seen these before. It wasn't abnormal to them. He looked at me with a very, very severe look of disapproval and anger that I had. At that point, they both went calmly inside, probably a little bit angry, and it felt like as though I had crossed the line. I took another look with my night vision goggles. The reason this event was not reported was due to the fact that it was not unidentified. I'm going to repeat this very clearly to the cameras. This craft was not unidentified. This was on our birds, and to the observer controller that called that out on the range, I'm not going to put his call sign out. Roger up, eyes on, hands on confirmation. That's our bird, but she doesn't need wind to get lift. She was hovering stationary. This was, I'm going to interject here. Sorry, guys. This was very dangerous. This craft showed up unscheduled. I got no notification. My job was to maintain command and control and to be the hub and top observer controller for the Tactical Operation Command Center for live fire desert warfare. That's the largest live fire warfare center for desert warfare on the planet and in history. So any moving objects that are on that desert floor or in those skies are supposed to be coordinated between myself and another group that I directly worked with the civilian personnel through Raytheon and the United States Air Force. So to get back to the statements here, the reason the event was skip. All right, well, this is going to jump in a little. I was the fastest promoted soldier in 25 years on the post. And I was the youngest #1 control seat holder at Fort Irwin NTC facility in history that held the title, the Voice of the Desert. When I cued my mic at my FM base station, it shut down all radios, and I could shut down the range for safety reasons or for medevac calls, safety reports, weather reports, and any other thing that was commanded by me, by my superiors. I skipped over that, but I filled it in good. Approximately 5 to 7 days later, sorry guys, this is personal. This affected the rest of my marriage, my life, and my relationship with my child. Approximately 5 to 7 days later, the following incident took place on Fort Irwin Road. It's the one road leading into the base. During the weekend pass, after the show, my wife and I had taken a pass to go see a movie. And this took place right after the live fire bunker, about 5 to 7 days afterwards. We skipped the second movie, or halfway through. I was really tired, just got back from running the range, 78-hour shifts with no relief. We passed a dry lake bed on the right-hand side. I've got that exact information already turned into the proper authorities. Thank you, Dr. Greer and all of his team. People out there, please get ready to come out. It's a saying they got, an old friend of mine, well, a new friend, but he reminded me of an old saying they have at Fort Benning, Georgia. It says, "Follow me." There's another saying we have at the Signal Corps Academy. It's on the badge. It says, "Pro Patria Vigilantes," or Vigilis. That means watchful of the nation. And then there's another group of men that I served with, and I tried to keep them alive every day to the best of my ability. Same guys that blew me up. And I still love them today, and I ask for amnesty for all of the information I'm going to say from here on in. These boys are on the ground, on the hottest spots in the planet, along with these other soldiers, and they're dying out there. They're out there killing people under false pretenses. I've also turned information in that may be able to prove that to the proper authorities, thanks to Dr. Greer and his team. His team so far has been accommodating, polite, honest, respectful, and this man is my new general. He leads the way. So rally up, rally on me. This man is the way. He speaks the truth. He is sound. Apologize, Dr. Greer. I've been waiting to say that for a long time. I thought they would laugh at me and look at me like I'm a lunatic. However, I brought my data. I brought the information. They stripped my information, said I had a driver's badge and a service ribbon. I had 2 accommodation medals, and I had total 7 certificates. They put me in for an ARCOM, which is the highest award you can get for a non-deployable base. I'm a non-combatant, but I'm as close as you can get to being one. Those boys out there, we receive KIT reports every day. That means killed in training. Had I been in a real tactical operation command center or bunker on the range, like the one that just got hit in Ukraine, then I'd be sending men out to die every day. Those guys hated the voice of the desert because we gave them commands to send their troops into danger and to death, even if we knew that they were just the decoys for the real mission. So I'm going to have to jump back to this. I apologize, Raven and everyone, for going off track, but that had to be said. Back to the story in hand. This isn't a story. It's my story. This is a real story. And don't forget that. This is real. This can't be made up. And I can give you the exact locations. I can drive Dr. Greer and all of the command, Congress, everyone there to the bunker. So we passed a dry lake bed on the right-hand side. My driver's side mirror reflected a powerful white light into my eyes. I saw a bright white light pop up out of the canyon that I had just come from. I looked over my left shoulder and saw a zipping light that zipped through the curves in that bend, mimicking my exact track and exactly the speed that I had had. Suddenly, all I could see was a bright light through all of my windows, and at that exact same time, my car's power steering and the engine's electrical system, everything died, completely died. When I exited the vehicle, I rushed towards the front of the car, believing there was someone pointing a floodlight at us. I had some words to say to that man. I stepped through a thick field of white plasma that encompassed a spheroid craft. As I turned to go inspect the craft, my wife opened the door, and she ran out towards the front of the car, and she was yelling, "Steve, no." She was instantaneously locked in place in a bright white field of plasma. As I looked at her, I thought to myself, it's okay, she's in stasis lock. That plasma enveloped her body with about 6 inches. I heard a female voice calmly state, it felt like it was in my head. It said, she is in stasis lock. It was a confirmation. Thank you, Dr. Greer. Relieved that she was safe, I started approaching the craft for further inspection. The craft and the car were nose to nose at a 90-degree formation. If you looked at it from a bird's eye view, it would be in an L shape, nose to nose. The craft was, there was a plasma field emitting approximately 12 inches off of the craft inside this white plasma field. The craft seemed about approximately 23 feet long. I stepped forward with my left hand extended and slightly reaching out to it. The craft responded to my movement. This startled me slightly, but I took it and stood still, just in case. By moving back and pivoting the nose away from my hand like a cat or a boxer, and it felt like a cat to me. Okay, sorry, lost my place. The exterior looked like polished black onyx. As I approached the craft, I noticed ambient temperature, not hot or cold. I kind of leaned down and touched the craft, and as I swiped my hand up the craft's starboard side, also towards the front of the craft, it was as smooth as glass. However, when I drew my hand back towards me, it felt like shark skin or a cat's tongue. That was followed by a reaction. The reaction followed my hand, and as I... Oh, it's slightly off here. So I'm going to have to do this with my hands just to describe it for you. As you can see here in the picture, I put my hand on the craft like this, and I kind of pushed my head forward. I can't do it here because of the mic, but I wanted to swipe my hand up and look at it like I was planing a piece of wood. As I drew my hand back, that's when I felt that this strange texture. It felt like tiger skin, or a shark skin, or like I said, a cat's tongue. As I drew my hand back, pixels jumped off the craft. They were like micro shavings. I would call it, they resembled graphene or magnetite shavings and nano-sized particles. As I did that, and as I swiped up first, I guess to get back to that, as I swiped up, the craft emitted a tiger stripe pattern up the starboard side of the craft. As I drew my hand backwards, the pixels popped up. And as I did, the craft purred. It bellowed through my body. I could feel it resonate my body cavity. And it was very intense. I felt like I was in contact with a living creature. Yes, sir. The reaction, okay, I'm already done with this. Thank you. As I drew my hand back, a lattice work opened up underneath. There was a very vibrant colors coming out of the craft, the underskin. This was a very thin nanolayer. And there was a meshwork, honeycomb style. And it was like a lattice work that was like a frame around this. Beneath that was, well, there were filaments flowing. They looked like a neural network. I tried to see any universal bus system or any computer systems as the analyst job that I had. I saw none of this. As I drew the hand closer to myself, trying to peer through all these bright, wicked, beautiful lights that were pinks, blues, and every light color you could think of in the spectrum, I wasn't able to see anything through it. So as I drew my hand this way, I kind of pressed off the vehicle. The vehicle was stable. I mean, this thing was locked in position. It's not like Star Wars when you jump off of something and it moves. This thing was solidly locked in place, solid. I seen a shape right here through my elbow as I leaned my face down, and I could see up into the sky above my car a mirage, which was like a silhouette or a heat foil on the road. And the stars shimmered in a straight line, and in a very long distance there was a curve. So it seemed to be curved. Either way, right when that ripple hit in the sky, the stars then refixed back into place. I realized I was looking at a cloaking device on a very, very, very large craft that seemed to encompass the whole desert area that I was under. At that moment in time, I glanced and panned my view just to try to get fathom the dimensions of this craft. And I saw a giant bright white light floating in the sky. And it was a hangar bay door opened. You couldn't see doors. It was just a bright white light. And it looked like a window floating through the sky, maybe even a portal. People might, from a distance, think, hey, that's a portal, but I obviously knew it was a craft. So this is a hangar bay door. And there was a female silhouette standing there. At that moment in time, I heard that same voice, and it said very clearly, you were not supposed to see that. You weren't supposed to see it. All of a sudden, I began feeling a thud, thud, thud sound. This was a resonant frequency being pulsed through my body. As I felt this, it increased in speed, thud, 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 thud. It was very rapid. You can see the same type of thing in the movie Interstellar, very similar when he falls through the black hole. Too similar. As this thud resonated in my body, I felt my molecular or my cells, maybe the quantum level of my body, feel like it was being resonated. I felt like maybe I'm going to be microwaved or something to that nature. Either way, I seen some bands coming through. I began lifting up off the ground. My vehicle began lifting with me also. As this happened, my body tipped back, and I could see the underbelly of the craft. You're going to see that design right in front of you. The rectangular shape right in the center there looked like a docking socket for an electrical port. If you're going to take a big male end, this would be the female receiving end for an electrical charger. To skip through that, there were some there's some highlighted parts here, and as you can read them there, I'm going to let you read that for yourself, just for time's sake. However, as this happened, instantaneously, I cued in, and I was flat on my back, and I was staring up at the ceiling, and my vision cued into a very, very bright white light. My vision panned over, and there was my wife flat on her back on a table. It was smaller than the table I was laying on, slightly lowered, and she still had the same exact expression on her face, like she was screaming no. However, she was no longer stuck in the running position. She was flat. As I panned a little more in front of me to kind of gauge where I was at, and this all happened in milliseconds, guys. This was, oh crap, what's happening? So this is a very short encounter here. As I panned over, I saw my vehicle with the right passenger tires end lifted up. I saw some people in some white suits, fully garmented masks with some breathing apparatuses. They were working on the vehicle. Slightly next to that was a strange blue rack that looked like it could have been an automotive rack. Could have had another purpose. That was my quick assumption. As I Oh, yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
No, well, if you want to just finish it up.
Yes, sir. So after that had happened, I saw a female right next to me. She was taking some samples from me. It was a human female. She had red hair. She had very fair skin. And after that moment, I also, as I panned over, I could see the window and the desert behind me. I realized we were not in space. I could see the desert floor. I could see the exact two rock formations and one far off in the distance. So this is pinpointed by GPS coordinates. So after that, I panned a little more over, and as I seen this open up and the bay door behind her open, or maybe just transparent, and I could see out. I also seen that craft right here docked in the ship. And that came through me after trying to get these schematics down on paper while talking to Michael Scratch. So thank you, sir. This man went through PTSD with me. So thank you,
You're
Doctor.
awesome. I know you're great. Thank you very much. There are obviously a great deal more to all these accounts. I'm sorry to have to cut that short, but we're sort of at the past our time we were going to wrap it up. But I will tell you that this is not a typical, the craft he was referring to are ours. That was Raytheon objects. Those are, and he said, yes, they are. His key point needs to be made, absolutely. They have been used in simulated quote-unquote abductions. In this case, a very decorated and heroic man was essentially tortured by this. This is a crime that must be investigated and brought to justice quickly. The next witness is D.C. Long from Fort Bragg. He was involved in an incidental event. Many of these witnesses at this point were people who saw something they shouldn't, and there were reprisals and things that happened. It's a pattern. The ones that were read in for a number of years, like one man that I shared earlier, 10 years in those operations, those are the ones waiting for greater protection for themselves before they step forward, but we have many of them. So with no further ado, I welcome my friend, D.C. Long.
I promise mine's going to be much quicker than some of these other guys, and this is the way I talk. So I apologize for that as well. Everyone that I've met here, I would love to go through every name. I would love to go through every situation. What these gentlemen have, we could spend years talking about it, just getting to all the moments and everything that meant the most to us. And unfortunately, I have a very short amount of time to do that. My military service began in 1997, and it stretched to 2013 until I was medically retired, injuries received in a combat jump. Ironically enough, the quick story that I'm going to tell you guys has virtually nothing to do with my military career until it got to the very end of the story. Long story short, my father grew up as a contractor. That was his entire life. He could build anything with his hands. He could tear it down and build it again for you. I segue that, and the only reason I bring him up is because my father is how I got tied into this story. As a government contractor on Fort Bragg, he met some people, he got friends with some people in the upper echelons in the military, the tip of the spear. The guys who didn't need the Army Corps of Engineers permission to build anything that they wanted. These people that I met when I was 13 years old. We would go on hunts together. We would go on fishing trips together, riding their planes. They would take us all over the continental U.S. just to enjoy their time together. People that I thought were my friends, that I didn't know that they were in the military until years after I had been in myself. We meet up at 18th Airborne Headquarters by my father's request from me. He asked me if I could help him assist. We didn't know where the project was. We were told that we were going to be met by an escort from the JFK Warfare Center. He shows up. I recognize him as one of my father's friends. I overheard that the place we're going to be going is Range 19. I'd never heard of this place before, hadn't since. They put us in a van, no windows, no partition to the front. So we were joking, what did you say? Because we're taking you to Leavenworth. We show up at Range 19. The only thing that was directly in front of me looked like a bunker, 45 degree inches from a concrete bunker, covered in trash. Looked like an actual dump. We open up, there's another escort, and they're waiting on us. They take us to a freight elevator. We take the elevator down. At that time, we were instructed, keep your heads down, keep your eyes on the heels of the men in front of you, or you'll be fired upon. I've heard plenty of instances of military jargon. People like to jive each other. I didn't take it as a joke, but I knew enough to just do what he told me to. I didn't want to risk it. As soon as the freight elevator opened, the first thing that I could see were a few personnel connexes to the right in a large hangar, maybe twice, 3 times the size of the area that we're in now. There was a monolithic slab directly in front of me that was being held up by nothing. The closer that I got to this slab, I felt an intense vibration inside of my body. I never felt anything like that before in my life, never anything since, but it left no sound. The loudest thing in that room was the silence and the footfalls of the people in front of and behind me. As I got closer, my natural southern curiosity took over. Oh, my shoes are untied. So I go down just to take a peek. And there's absolutely nothing up underneath this monolithic slab that if I had to estimate would be well over 100 tons. Absolutely nothing holding it up. You can see by the picture, there's another boulder directly behind it. It was flat on the ground. There were 2 other people beside it. I could only see heels and feet. To the right, you could see what looked like a boulder. And all 3 of these that I could tell had this box on top that was black with spires that came off, and I couldn't tell where it was connected, but it obviously had something to do with the levitation. The one to the right was being spun by the personnel that you could see in the picture. At this point, from my knees, the escort needed me in the back, said, let's go. We follow on, go downstairs to our appointed place to take measurements for an underground firing facility for a live fire range. Excuse me. When it was all said and done, less than 15, 20 minutes later, we make our way back to the surface through the same hangar that we had noticed the monolithic slabs and the boulders. And there was absolutely nothing there. There was no noise for anyone taking anything out. It was 1 flight down to our appointed place, but you could still hear that there was nothing going on in the facility that we were in. We make our way out. We get back in the van, and they take us back to 18th Airborne Headquarters so we can retrieve our telephones, our IDs. Something was said to my father, and they retrieved all of the notes that were taken. Everything that he had that he recorded from whenever we were downstairs, they took it from him. I didn't think much of it. I go back upstairs, help him wrap up in the G5 war room. And it was at that time there was a gentleman sitting at the desk. Everyone was cleared out. And he had 2 pieces of paper. He said, I need you to sign this NDA. Absolutely not. You know, we didn't so much take it as a joke, but we just didn't feel like the things that we had witnessed, although I did realize it was something that I never should have seen in my life. We weren't going to sign it. Didn't think anything of it. I leave. I get a call the next day, less than 24 hours later. Hey, man, you need to come down. We're trying to go to work, and everything's locked up. Everything's gone. Everything that my father had worked for, from the time that I was a child until I became a man, became a soldier, and the company that had my name on it, everything was seized. Absolutely everything was seized. The pencils that he would use to make bid submittals to the Army Corps of Engineers was even taken because it contributed from the business. Everything was taken. I can't illustrate that point enough. My father went from being a very humble millionaire to absolutely broke, bankrupt, and destitute in 24 hours. Now, I wish I could tell you more about how much I love this man, not just because I have his name, not just because he's my father, but he was my best friend. He led me through every battle when I came home to let me know that it was okay to feel the things that I felt. This man and I, we were always together. The only thing that could separate us was the deployments and the uniform that I wore. When I got done with my fight, I found my father. When I was scared, I found my father, etc. This man that was my best friend looked me in the eye when I found him again and said, "Hey man, do you think this had something to do with Range 19? Please pardon my language." My father looks at me and says, "Don't you ever fucking bring that up to me again." That was the last time that I heard my father's voice in this life. That was the last time that we ever had any peaceful interaction, and that was as peaceful as it got. Shortly after, I continued on, and we had a JFEX. Any of my old paratroopers, they know what that is. It's a jump field training exercise, battalion wide. It's a big deal. There's only 12 men in my stick, getting ready to go out of the bird. I'm the first man looking at the horizon, waiting for the jump master to give me the signal. His hand's raised. I notice at the right side, someone coming up to my shoulder, and it's one of the escorts. One of the men that I knew personally from the time I was a child till I was a man and a soldier. He hooks up, he looks at me, gives me a wink. I didn't think much of it. To me, there was no danger at that point. Green light goes off, I get a hit in my back, and then something hits me in the side of the face, and it's a static line. The gentleman to my right, the man that I knew, threw his static line intentionally, and it snapped my neck. I go to fall out of the aircraft, deploy my combat pack, full oscillation. The only thing that I heard after that was the sound that my body made when it broke. When I woke up a month later, I was told that I was not fit to be a Ranger. I was not fit to be airborne. I wasn't fit to be a soldier. My career was effectively over. Even throughout all this time, I could not reach out to my father. He wouldn't take my calls. He was homeless. I didn't know. I just thought he didn't want to talk to me. Eventually, I ended up in the same situation. This follows further down the road to about 2 years ago, whenever I finally was saved by someone who I didn't even deserve to hear the sound of their voice. I had intentionally grown my hair past my shoulders, my beard down to my stomach. I was 135 pounds just because I was hoping I could hide. I was hoping I could get away from what put me in that position to begin with. I get a phone call. It was 2 years ago. We found Daddy. He's in the hospital. I go down to see my father. He couldn't speak. The man that was 6'4", 240 pounds, a superhero in my eyes, not just because he was my daddy, because he was a tough son of a bitch. He was laying in a hospital bed, 98 pounds. When the people who I encountered after the fact that had actually spent time, excuse me, and got my father out of his homeless situation to help him get back on his feet, to give him the drive, to get back to doing the only thing that he knew how to do was to be a government contractor, they put him back in contact with some of the people that he thought could help him. I can't illustrate this fact enough. In the time span of 3 months, my father went from 6'4", 240 to 98 pounds, dying in a hospital room, and he couldn't even speak because the chemo was burning his lips. I told him, I love you. Don't worry about us. We're square. I want to make you proud. Before Dr. Greer and I came in contact with each other, and I'm almost done, I wrote my story, and I entitled it, I'm Afraid to Say. And people have asked me, well, why did you wait so long? I mean, it's obvious why we waited so long to send it. Nobody knows this. My family doesn't know this. Dr. Greer obviously doesn't know this. When I sent that, I was planning on taking my life because they took every damn thing from me. I could handle losing my career. I was willing to die for my country. I was hoping like hell I would. Somehow I survived. And then they tried to take me again. They can have all that. I knew that when I put these around my neck. But my intention was to take my own life because I just couldn't do it anymore. I heard this man's words with Sean Ryan, if good men do nothing, then evil men will prevail. I am damn tired of doing nothing. This is the absolute last thing that I'm going to say to you. I was trained to never fight. I was trained to fight, never give up, never stop, as long as you had a breath in your body. I gave my breath away. The people in this room, everyone that I've had the blessed opportunity to spend time with, I've heard you say that we're brave, that we're heroes, and it embarrasses me because I personally felt like I don't deserve to be in the room with all of you heroes, because I would not have the words and the breath to come from my body if it wasn't for the strength that you give me when you shake my hand, when you hug my neck. Thank you so much. Godspeed.
I'd like to introduce, and thank you very much. Again, men are courageous, and it's very emotional. And it should be. Should be. I'd like to introduce Eric Hecker. He's a Raytheon contractor based for about a year at the South Pole. He was involved in a neutrino light array. He has an enormous amount of information, but in the interest of time, we'll be brief. Thank you, Mr. Hecker.
Hello, everybody. Ladies, gentlemen, members of the press. I'm very happy that you're giving me this attention and this information attention because it needs to get out to the world. I will start, since we have to be brief. I have already given all pertinent information and supporting documentation to the Senate Intelligence Committee and AARO. They informed me that all of my information will be recorded for public record and shared with Congress. It is that important. In 2010, I was selected to go down to the South Pole Station in Antarctica for an entire year by Raytheon Polar Services as an employee of a third-party contractor for the National Science Foundation. I functioned in a dual-role capacity as a tradesman and a firefighter. My responsibilities required me to be more informed than most of my crew and offered me complete access to the facilities. What I learned from this unique experience needs to be shared with the entire world. The technology at the South Pole Station certainly can do what it is presented as its primary purposes, and unfortunately, much more. The IceCube neutrino detector is presented as a passive listening device for the purposes of the science as presented. But I'm going to skip right through the chase, folks. I have provided documentation that proves that the 5,160, what they call DOMs, that are embedded in the ice can actually transmit at 2,047 volts each. That gives us a long list of things to consider. It is effectively a multifaceted directed energy weapons platform that I will list rapidly a few things that it can do. Vehicle detection. We're learning that these off-world craft, on-world craft, ours or other nations, are also emitting neutrinos. So this makes the South Pole Station effectively an air traffic control station for this new level of equipment that nobody's discussing. In addition to the ability to detect neutrinos and the exotic vehicles, I have provided documentation that shows that this is also a system for faster than light communications. In the past, Gary McKinnon has hacked NASA, found the off-world fleet, the list of captains, and it's apparent that if we have faster than light vehicles moving throughout this system, we're going to need faster than light communications. This is that facility. Unfortunately, I have other bad news. The season that I was there, 2010 to 2011, we converted from construction to operations and maintenance in both the elevated station and the detector array. Unfortunately, when they first fired it up, that was when we had the earthquakes in Christchurch, New Zealand. There was 2 incidental shots before they were able to target it correctly. This is an earthquake-generating device as well. This is the weapons of war that we have to deal with now and what Raytheon's hiding. There's an ELF system at the South Pole Station that when I arrived, I was told it was off, dismantled, and completely defunct. In my work, I will rapidly just tell you, I had to figure out the circuitry for certain other repairs, and I found that this system is in fact completely energized, up and running, and being utilized with the other systems for nefarious purposes as well. The Atmospheric Research Observatory is in what we call the clean air sector. I witnessed myself a very powerful green laser shooting out of the top of this facility into the cosmos. This, I believe, is a secondary form of long-range communications and/or a defense system. I am not saying that we need to be scared of anything that's out there, but please understand the military-industrial complex is happy to invest all of your money in alleviating their fears. A question of power comes into play for all of these facilities that are present. I assure you, I knew what was going on, I knew the load demands of the facility, and all of these new items exceed the demand for the systems that I was presented. I am doing due diligence and research. I believe there is either a secondary power supply there that is either nuclear, that was there prior to the start of the Antarctic Treaty, which prohibits such things, and or that there is some sort of exotic power supply system there that just is not in the verbiage of the treaty, so it negates the responsibility to the parties involved. I think that pretty much covers it for time. If anybody wants to find out more, I have a website where all this information is at. For brevity, I'll wrap it up, but you can go to deciphering.tv. I've documented all of this stuff, and information is available.
Awesome. Thank you. We are running a little over, and I apologize, but I think it's worth hearing as much as we can from these very courageous men. One of the things, if I had time, I would run through. We can go through very quickly. I think people in the military and in Congress and the American people need to know the difference between the man-made advanced technologies and how they look and the extraterrestrial vehicles. We're going to run through a side-by-side. You can look and see ET, one on the left, seamless. It is actually created in a material science and technology we don't have time to go into, but we understand that, versus the man-made ones that have components, parts, wires, and what have you. Next. And again. Next. And again. And then you hear on the right, that is the Norton Air Force Base 1988 air show, classified. We have a witness who was in there, and these on the right are man-made. They were late Mercury era, 59 through early 60s in their construction, because we had mastered gravity control in October 1954. So these had been in the solar system by the time my uncle, who's Northrop Grumman, had worked on the lunar module out on Long Island to put Neil Armstrong on the moon. Next. This is, again, an ET vehicle. On the left, one with struts, parts, pipes, and often humming a transmission, sort of transformer sound on the right. Next. And again, one that's extraterrestrial, and a vague copycat that's man-made. Next. And again. And again. Next. Now the one on the right, this is a little bit to unpack. It takes us a couple hours. I'll go through it quickly. You can look up the Cash Landrum case back in 1980 outside Houston in Texas. The one on the right is actually an ET craft. It was they were unable to figure out how to get its energy system to work. They, I think rather foolishly, put a nuclear energy system on it. It malfunctioned. And as it did so, it radiated innocent people in their vehicle underneath it. It later was escorted by helos to a base west of there. The man who debriefed the 4 human pilots of this and debriefed them, we know, and we have his testimony. He's Air Force Office of Special Investigations out of Kirkland Air Force Base. So the Cash Landrum case involves civilian injuries. They tried to sue the government. The government denied they had any knowledge of it, but the constitutional government of the United States doesn't know this. This is the big problem. Next. And this, I want to just play this for a moment. We're in Washington. Here is an esteemed senator from Hawaii, and listen to what he said in the 1980s.
A shadowy government with its own Air Force, its own Navy, its own fundraising mechanism, and the ability to pursue its own ideas of the national interest, free from all checks and balances, and free from the law itself.
Free from all checks and balances, and free from the law itself. Now, the media often wants to portray this issue, conspiracy people, and of course, at this point, if you disagree with someone anywhere, you just call them a conspiracy theorist, okay? This man knew what he was talking about.
A shot.
Oops. So he absolutely knew what was going on with this. He was denied access, not just on the Iran-Contra issue, but on this specific issue. And how do we know that? We have an attorney, Derek Garcia here. He is now heading up the Disclosure Project Legal Defense Fund, and we have, as of about 2 hours ago, 90+ attorneys and legal professionals to represent Disclosure Project witnesses and to pursue racketeering, influence, corrupt organization lawsuits against various corporations and individuals that are liable. The United States Congress and President need to act, but we will act pending their action. I'd like to then welcome Derek Garcia to the podium.
Good afternoon. My name is Derek Garcia. I'm a civil rights attorney from New Mexico. I've been in practice for 13 years. I'm admitted to practice in the District of New Mexico, the Federal District, the United States Court of Appeals for the 10th Circuit, as well as the U.S. Supreme Court. I'm joined in the audience by my colleague and attorney, Paige Fox from Illinois, and numerous attorneys who have now joined our legal team nationwide and internationally. We are dedicated to ending decades of UFO secrecy and releasing vital technologies which will bring an end to our current environmental and energy crisis. On May 23rd, we announced the creation of the Disclosure Project legal team over Dr. Greer's YouTube channel. Since our initial announcement, we now have over 90 legally affiliated individuals, different practice areas and expertise, paralegals, law students, law clerks, members of law enforcement, and criminal investigators, legal professionals from over 23 states and nearly all relevant jurisdictions, and a growing list of preeminent attorneys internationally. We continue to make the call for pro bono attorneys, all volunteer at this point, and legal professionals, and add new members of the Disclosure Project legal team on an hourly basis. We have assembled a one-of-a-kind and strictly nonpartisan volunteer legal team for the purpose of moving disclosure forward once and for all. Our goals are to legitimize the essentially TAFOs and promote public awareness as to the numerous related constitutional and legal implications on this issue. We wish to support the constitutional government in regaining full operational control over these secret, illegal, black budget, beyond black budget projects. And we will gain control over this issue for the first time since President Eisenhower. We will seek truth about propulsion and advanced energy technologies capable of solving world hunger, poverty, and the energy crisis. We will seek justice for those who have been harmed by non-disclosure and technology seizure through filing civil RICO actions, Bivens claims, and numerous and multiple legal theories aimed at getting to the ultimate truth on this issue. The competent, under oath testimony already developed by the Disclosure Project team, Dr. Greer, and these courageous witnesses, and represented in the Disclosure Project intelligence archives developed over 30 years of Dr. Greer's work, may also be used in criminal prosecutions by United States attorneys or criminal prosecutors across the globe to seek indictments on the numerous RICO crimes which have been committed on this issue, with the aim of keeping the issue buried. Just a small sample, and I know we're short for time, of the crimes that are directly related to this issue. Disclosure Project witnesses and gathered intelligence has established the following major crimes: treason against the United States of America, murder, mass murder, torture, kidnapping and abduction, embezzlement of government funds, embezzlement of private funds, bank fraud, money laundering, illegal surveillance, insubordination and insurrection against the United States, false imprisonment, witness and whistleblower intimidation, theft of intellectual property, trespassing, burglary, framing of innocent people, government corruption, blackmail, bribery, and illegal use of the government and military property, and many, many more crimes. We hoped to support the civilian government, criminal prosecutors. Any evidence that we develop and continue to develop can be used for that purpose. My personal experience in coming to this issue was as a young intern for Senators Bingaman and Domenici in the summer of 2001 on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. The Disclosure Project press conference had just taken place on May 9th of 2001. During my internship, I distributed numerous copies of the Disclosure Project executive summary and briefing document and other written materials to various members of Congress and their staff, including direct submissions to leading members of the Senate in the underground subway system. Waiting in the hallway of the Hart Senate office building, I encountered a hero of our country, Senator Daniel Inouye, walking back from his office. I gave the senator a copy of the Disclosure Project executive summary and asked him if he had heard about the Disclosure Project and what he thought of UFOs, extraterrestrial intelligence, and the possibility of these intelligences actually visiting Earth. Senator Inouye responded by hand signaling me to follow him back to his private office. He shut the door of his private office. Senator Inouye said he dealt with the UFO issue extensively while he was chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee in 1976. Senator Inouye confirmed that he had seen the May 9th, 2001 Disclosure Project press conference here at the National Press Club, and that the testimony provided by those courageous witnesses at the time was substantially accurate and correct, based on his direct experience and briefings on this subject. Senator Inouye confirmed that many UFOs and projects related to such represented genuine extraterrestrial vehicles, and that this issue, as portrayed by Dr. Stephen Greer and the 2001 Disclosure Project witnesses, was real, genuine, and absolutely not a hoax. I asked Senator Inouye if it was true that a secret, unacknowledged entity or control group operating illegally inside the United States government, internationally, and/or within the private sector among defense contractors and corporations had direct operational control of the UFO ETV issue. Senator Inouye confirmed his statement that there exists a shadowy government with its own Air Force, its own Navy, its own fundraising mechanism, and the ability to pursue its own ideas of the national interest, free from all checks and balances and free from the law itself, as stated during the Iran-Contra hearings in 1987. I asked whether he was exaggerating when he made this statement. I asked if perhaps he was speaking of another government. I asked many questions that day, but he looked to me and he told me directly that he was not exaggerating, that the illegal shadow government did exist at the time he made his statement in 1987 and continued to exist in 2001 during our conversation, and that the entity had thus far escaped complete scrutiny, control, and oversight by the legally authorized and constitutional government of the United States. Further corroborating documents and details to my personal testimony on this issue is available in a signed affidavit that I have executed concerning what Senator Inouye told me directly. For members in the media, I can definitely get you an electronic copy. We encourage you to join our legal team by visiting our YouTube channel or the disclosure.legal@gmail.com. And we thank you and all those in our nation and worldwide who have volunteered their legal talents so far as we continue to develop a strategy and approach that will stand the test of time. Show up, suit up, stand up for the future of your country and for your world. Thank you.
Thank you. So I would like to thank very sincerely Mr. Garcia for his work. When he first contacted me, he was a 20-year-old student at Wesleyan. Now he's the age of a couple of my daughters. He's now an attorney, and we've gone full cycle, where now he is stepping up with all these other wonderful attorneys and legal professionals to represent what we are doing pro bono, since we are at present an unfunded operation. I would like to also just quickly go through, we're not going to have time to go through everything here, but there is a history of hearings on this subject going back many decades. You know, we have Blue Book, Robertson Report, the Gerald Ford hearings, the Condon Report, and et cetera. These have all been, unfortunately, submarined and corrupted by influences that have prevented the truth of this coming out. We have to be very careful, because Eisenhower said only an informed citizenry can prevent the loss of our freedoms and democracy. I would like to acknowledge how important, let's go through these signatures, the 16 members next of the Senate who have written for the Pentagon to pick up its pace and further fund the investigations. But they have to have watchdog external folks looking at that. That's what the Disclosure Project has to do. The also chairs and co-chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee have written to AARO with concerns about the feedback. There are people I know who have been through the AARO office and the SCIF, and they have contacted me explicitly saying that some of their information is not getting back to the members properly. This cannot happen. The Congress has passed a law. The Pentagon and this office must comply, and the people of the United States must insist that they comply with the law that has been passed. Next. We won't have time to go into this in depth. I just want to mention, I want to be extremely careful what I'm about to say, because it will be misconstrued by various folks out there. There are civilizations extremely advanced that are concerned with what we're doing. This station at the South Pole is a much later version of a man that I worked with for a number of years in the 90s who invented the neutrino light detector system on the satellites up in space. He knew then that these were being used, and this was in the 70s, to track, target, and destroy extraterrestrial assets in space and also around the Earth. Now, these civilizations, given their extremely advanced state, had they wished to punch back, they would have. However, they are inordinately peaceful, they are organized in a group, and we need to come forward as a people instead of looking at everything as a military threat and see that there's an opportunity here, and there has to be diplomacy and science and disclosure of the truth in order to avoid a catastrophe. My understanding is the technologies that are in these covert programs have become so advanced that at some point they could be a threat to these other worlds. As such, it puts our entire planet at risk because of the unchecked power and technology of the illegal secret government projects. This is a much graver national security threat than China, Russia, Iran, or anything the news media is currently covering. Next. I want to give you a call to action all of you listening, the citizens of the world, not just the United States, if you know someone who is a government contractor, a government employee, military, what have you, who has information on this, please have them contact us at this email address. Please write your members of Congress. We live in a democracy still. You should write to your 2 senators and your representative and the President of the United States expressing your concern and calling for open hearings. We need to network with our friends and families and get them to support this effort. You need, if you can, to contribute to our effort. I'm retired as a doctor, so, you know, I can't fund everything at this point like I had. If you can assist with the Energy Research Lab that we are proposing in the Lost Century, you'll see that, then please contact us. We have a $50 million funding need to stand up a open source energy lab. What does that mean? We would develop these zero-point energy technologies and they would be released free of charge, open source to the entire world so we can quickly solve the environmental and poverty problems we are facing. Our goal is to acquire or develop a zero-point quantum vacuum system no later than 2026. That's very fast. So we need your help. If you're a scientist who knows these technologies or in other capacities can help us, hoping we get funding, we will call on you to be part of this multi-centered lab. In other words, we would have this lab streamed continuously. All breakthroughs would be blockchain distributed in real time, and there would be other affiliated labs around the world working on this, so it could not be invaded and shut down in one place. Next. And in wrapping up, I'd like to share something that I learned from Colonel Philip Corso prior to his death when I was involved, and he came forward, as you all know, wrote the day after Roswell. He had been involved in some of the technology transfer. And he had an experience out at the White Sands missile range back in the 50s. Pretty sure it was 1956, but I don't want to be, don't quote me on that. And he was a colonel. He was involved in these projects. There was an ET craft that came in daytime and came down over the range. He went out there with a couple of his guys. And this craft, it would be three-dimensional and then vanish like a heat wave, like Stephen Digna explained, and then back again. Finally, it stayed. There was an ET that emerged, extraterrestrial biological entity, and he said, the ET was communicating, please don't hit us with these radar. Can you get these radar systems out? You know, and was asking, because they were operational, of course, at that time, they were operational at Roswell. And he missed being a brash young, you know, Air Force colonel, and he says, what's in it for me? And the ET says, a new world if you can take it. Now, I was 1. Now, you know, I have 12 grandchildren. What kind of world are we going to leave them if we don't fix this problem? Because it involves peace, and we have to work towards contact that is in a peaceful paradigm. We have launched a very controversial project, as I get attacked the most for, the CE5, or Close Encounter of the Fifth Kind contact program, as sort of an experimental, community-based outreach to these civilizations. We have had a number of extraordinary contact experiences. This is sort of a prototype that the French government during the presidency of Sarkozy asked us to demonstrate, and we set up an operation in France that was protected where we did have events take place. I think we have to begin to ask, what can we do as a civilian government where we don't try to militarize and weaponize everything we don't understand? Because here's the problem. If you're a hammer, the whole world's a nail. And so we have to get this disclosed properly so that our brighter scientists, our academics, our political leadership, and our diplomats and the citizens can take the lead on this issue rather than an illegal and clandestine operation that is a threat to national and world security. Thank you for your attention. I am told we have to be out of here at 5. We've gone over about an hour, and I apologize for that. But if there are any members of the press here that have a question, you can ask them, and we'll be happy to answer them briefly. Any members of the media? Yes. He's asking about our safety. Look, if I was worried about my safety, I would have never walked on down this path. I have been threatened, and we've had some losses on our team. I've had a few people over the years that worked with me who have been killed. It's difficult. But I just think the mission of what we're trying to do is more important than one life, mine. So you can't worry about that. We do have good security now, and I think that there are people, frankly, in these very classified projects who do want to help us and protect us, and they have been since about 1998. And it's pretty much. Or is there another? Oh, you're welcome. Yes, he's asking about my comment about gravity control being accomplished in October 1954. A member of my team for many years was the top scientist at the Naval Research Labs here in Washington, so one of the major Department of Defense labs. He was one step down after the director of the lab, and he had been in a vault where he saw the document in a skiff and saw the documentation that we had mastered gravity control, meaning that we had had experimentation with it earlier, but mastering it so it was stable occurred in October of 1954. His name is Richard Foch, F-O-C-H. He is deceased, but he worked with us for many years and was very much in the inside. He also introduced me to some folks down near the Redstone Arsenal and a man who is under contract with IT&T, but he actually is working for the CIA, and he has developed these technologies also beginning in the 70s. And I've been at this man's skiff, he's been at my home. When he was going to develop one of these systems for us, some thugs went down and threatened he and his wife's life. So, you know, he had to back down. At that time, we didn't have a momentum and a way to secure his safety. So, yes, I mean, we do know that this goes back a long time. I know that we have Senator John Warner's son here, who his father was involved with this committee. It's the majority Joint Intelligence Committee, along with George H.W. Bush, who was the one who told Clinton to back down off of looking into this. And I was very involved with that. There's a long story here. We'd be here all night. But we do know that Paul Mellon, the grandfather of John Warner IV, who is here today, went over and retrieved a German disc at the end of World War II that was their prototype to develop a so-called anti-gravity electromagnetic gravitic system, but it wasn't fully operational by the time the war ended. But that became something that then was pursued later through operations that were highly classified in the United States and in the very black aerospace world. And we have this very well documented, by the way. This was a great deal of history here of the United States after World War II that the public doesn't know about, but it'll come out. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Greer, Sherry Beal here from arighttoknow.com, and I just want to thank you so much for your bravery in covering what many of us journalists in the truth movement see as ringing the alarm for the most critical topic you know, we've really learned that we, the people that we've been funding, unbeknownst to us with our taxpayer money, these black operations. What can you tell us that we can do? I know you had a call to action, but for not just the journalists, but everyone in this room and everyone tuning in, what can we do to help support and really flip this movement right now and help save, you know, our planet, humanity, have access to the free energy that we have been funding as well?
Well, we need networking support. We need people like Sean Ryan, who had me on his show and got this message out to so many members of the military, Delta Force guys, Navy SEALs, others, and are now coming forward. We need significant funding because it's an unfunded project. Everyone who works with it is a volunteer, has been for 33 years. But I also think that we need people to network with friends, and it needs to be a grassroots movement of the people. And people need to also take the action I mentioned with their members of Congress. Most importantly, I think everyone who knows the truth about this needs to work night and day. This is what I did. I basically gave up about $12 million in earnings as a doctor to do this. But my view of it is that we need people who understand what's at stake and walk the talk. And it's not, it needs to go beyond just gab, and we need action. And I think the timeline for it is now. This is all emerging. I just heard from a very important figure in Australia this morning. He said the defense sector there is following this. There are multiple people there going to come forward. There's a big asset base there in their Pine Gap, and the members of the Australian Senate are also open to pursuing this. So this needs to be a worldwide effort, not just United States. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Apollo Sterry here, Third Phase of Moon. I'm just curious to know if the witness list that you rolled earlier with their accounts, if that's actually available anywhere for us to look at?
Yes, all of this is available, assuming we can get it to you. That can be emailed to you, the redacted one. Obviously, the unredacted one is very sensitive. I am not going to disclose the names of the hundreds of men and women who want to not be disclosed publicly. Now, it's very courageous of these guys to do it. I know what it's like to be put in the crosshairs of this subject and ridiculed and defamed for 30 years. So these are very courageous people, but that list you can actually receive as well as the entire facilities list. Now, the facilities list just gives you a location, doesn't tell you quite everything that's there. It gives you a little bit of a little blurb. But it's what we can provide at this point. Again, remember, any requests like this are being fulfilled by volunteers who have day jobs and lives. So be patient with your requests, and please communicate that to our staff or our email address that I provided. Yes, other?
Yeah, over here.
Yes.
Who are these C-suite or henchmen for this ISG, just so we can be aware of who we're dealing with?
The illegal secret government. Well, look, I know a number. I've actually met with a few of them over the years. He's deceased now, General Stubblebine, offered me $2 billion not to do what I'm doing in 1992. There were witnesses to this. The level of corruption is almost unbelievable. We do have a man who's this former chairman of a major Fortune 100 company who wants to come forward, but he and his family have been threatened in the last month. So I've had these conversations, and this man, by the way, confirms that corporation has free energy. He regrets what he's done. He is retired, and he would love to see this come forward for his children and grandchildren. He's a decade or more older than me. So at this point, the ones who are not wanting to be named, I don't name. However, if there's a proper investigation out of the White House and the Senate, we will name them, and if they need to be subpoenaed, they will be subpoenaed. But I mean, this is a process where I don't want to burn bridges to people who are actually sympathetic to what we're doing, but we have not provided enough protection, including immunity from seizure of their assets. This gentleman has several $100 million. He doesn't want to have that confiscated. He doesn't want his family threatened. And so it's a complicated issue. It's not like he's blurting out a bunch of names. Other folks who have been named on this group are Admiral Bobby Ray Inman, who is still living, and other folks. So I think he was Director of National Security Agency, Deputy Director of CIA, and moved over to Science Applications International Corporation. We know which corporations are involved. We know where many of their plants are and bases are. And I think those have to be put under the control of the President and the Congress immediately. And I think that's more important than, you know, the personalities involved. But ultimately, it does come down to people. All of it comes down to people. And I think we need to have a number of those folks who are now out of their positions, out of the C-suite, step forward. But we need, so I keep emphasizing this, clear protections for them, because this is no laughing matter. I mean, when you've heard what happens, and many of these were people who incidentally came across this, and it destroyed their lives. Imagine if you were read in for 20 years. I mean, there are wet works, kill teams that will be deployed. And so this is very, very serious. It needs to be taken seriously, and I will not be, you know, too cavalier about what I'm going to require for those folks who do want to do the right thing. Now, the ones who don't want to do the right thing, I said this, we put a clock on it. The Congress and the President puts a clock on that, and then at that point, they get prosecuted. Or, by any means necessary, this gets resolved. Yes.
Dr. Greer, can you give any, I'm over here.
I see, yeah.
Gavin McClellan.
Sorry,
can
Mike.
you give any clarification on the Van Allen radiation belts? There's a lot of dissension about the Van Allen radiation belts. Give any clarification on transportation through them?
No, I don't have any specific information on that issue. I do know that these technologies that we're talking about would have no problem going through, frankly, solid matter, ocean, et cetera.
If you can wait.
Is there another member of the media press?
Wait for the mic, please.
Thank you very much. Dr. Greer, can you tell us more about the programmed life forms that are involved in the so-called abduction phenomenon, please? Thank you.
Yes, well, those, you know, they've been around for a very long time. As you know from our Air Force Office of Special Investigations witness who appeared in Unacknowledged, that documentary in 2017, in the early days, and I actually have met with people on the tactical teams from the good old days where they would have people who were short, looked whatever, and there was stagecraft like a Disney set, and they would be on these electrogravitic devices using various chemicals and what have you to abduct people. The purpose for that is to present a false threat from space. This is what Wernher von Braun, who invented the rocket for Germany in World War II, told Carol Rosin on his deathbed and begged her to try to prevent the weaponization of space, and et cetera. He knew this was going on in 1974 when he made that warning, and you can see her testimony in the Disclosure Project website on YouTube. However, it evolved from that point to where they have very sophisticated robotic objects and beings that look exactly like a gray or this or that, and I've met with multiple people who have constructed them, operated them, or been victims of them who are military. Mr. Digna was actually abducted and taken into this craft through technologies that sounds like science fiction. But remember what Ben Rich told my friend James Goodall, who is here, is an aerospace historian, right before he died. And he said, anything you can imagine that they've done on Star Trek is out in the desert. He's not talking about Area 51. He's talking about the Lockheed assets. And we've already done it. We have it. It exists. And we've either used it or decided not to use it. He also wrote the reply to one of his friends that Mr. Schratt obtained, where the man said, do you think UFOs exist, and are they extraterrestrial or ours? He said they are both. And that is from the director and the head Lockheed Skunk Works, Ben Rich, legendary. So I always tell people, we have all this in the archive. Please don't just take my word for it. Never had a clearance, never been to government. I'm an emergency doctor doing this to help the future of our planet. But we have all the information that proves every bit of this. And under oath, these courageous men and hundreds of others will tell the truth. Yes?
Because of the shadow government and other forces, just how threatened is U.S. sovereignty?
I couldn't understand the question.
U.S. sovereignty, is it threatened because of the shadow government and other forces?
I will tell you that effectively, the constitutional government of the United States, at least in this area, has been nullified since about the late 1950s. And we have tracked this. It's a huge problem. Senator Inouye knew it. Now, in other regards, it's business as usual. But remember, this organization is transnational. It operates globally with alacrity, as I mentioned. And so this is not just a U.S. problem. It's a global problem. But the center of gravity of it is here in the United States. Other questions before we need to move?
Cassandra Joan Butler from Pathfinder News. Dr. Greer, thank you. This has been mind-blowing, but are there international groups such as yourself, similar to Disclosure Project, across the globe? Are there networking with other like minds?
Well, yes, we have people involved with what we're doing in various other countries, including Russia in their space program and other places. We recently obtained the testimony of a Russian general that back in the Soviet era, where an extraterrestrial vehicle and beings put some of the people at an intercontinental ballistic missile site kind of in stasis so they could go in and fixed an overheating missile that wasn't being detected that could have blown up and it could have triggered World War III. Now, I will tell you, there are a number of incidences that involve nuclear sites, weapon storage areas, et cetera, where there have been, and power plants, where there have been ET craft, because there's energy being given off from those systems that are beyond the electromagnetic pulse spectrum that Dr. Zohari, who was here this weekend, who's a physicist, described in the scalar range. So I think that the interstellar civilizations, these extraterrestrial civilizations, have a profound concern because those could be a threat to them, those energy forms, but they know it's a threat existential to the Earth. I actually honestly believe these civilizations regard the Earth as precious, that humanity is filled with promise, and I think they have been trying to warn us and keep us from going down the path of either geophysical disaster or war that would be using these sort of weapons. The most dangerous weapons are unacknowledged. They're not the nuclear ones. They're the ones that Mr. Hecker is talking about and others, and we have a great deal of information on that. I have folks who worked for the NSA and also Raytheon who have used some of those in horrific ways to trigger deliberately earthquakes and other problems. So this is something that is very serious, and it has to be gotten under control. When I say that these projects need to get under supervision and control by some sane folks who aren't sociopaths, it has to happen fairly quickly at this point. Yes. Hello? Oh.
Billy Carson, Forbidden Knowledge TV.
Hey there, coming in loud and clear, buddy.
I'm in. With regards to the civilian RICO, can we foresee, if this process is successful, any potential prison time for any of these corporate execs that are behind this?
Look, an eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind. I think what we want to do first is to gain their cooperation with the effort. We hope we can exert enough pressure both through what we're doing as civilians, through a civilian RICO and other actions, as well as what's happening in the Congress, that gets resolved. What you don't want to do is just throw down with folks who have technologies, and I will tell you, this is sensitive, But when I was briefing Admiral Tom Wilson, who is the head of Intelligence Joint Chiefs of Staff in 1997, 26 years ago, I can't believe it's been that long, at the end I asked, we need your help to get these projects under proper control. And he says, well, does the Secretary of Defense, I can't do it without his, and he's not giving me that order. He says, what about the President? I said, no, the President has been waived off. This is Bill Clinton, and I know exactly how that happened. Because I was very involved with Lawrence Rockefeller and all the Clinton issue. So the question becomes very quickly, and he said to me, how would we take on a group who have technologies 1,000 years beyond what I know we have, which is the best thing I can deploy is a B-2 stealth bomber. So this is a very serious issue strategically. How do you approach this? Now, the constitutional government of the United States has the rule of law, and I think if it's disclosed properly, the support of the populace and the people, and the rank and file. And I want to point out, virtually all of the Disclosure Project witnesses, except some of these few that are very much at the top, were just obeying orders. They were at a site, they were Delta Force or a Navy SEAL or what have you. They didn't know that the management of it had escaped constitutional control. And I didn't know that until 1993. And that was, of course, my coming of age when I realized, my God, the president and the director of the CIA are being denied access, and then multiple senators and congressmen that I met with privately. So I think that what we want to do is resolve this in a peaceful, legal fashion, and we do not want to just go straight to, DEFCON 1, right? We don't want to go to that. So I think we need to do that in the next 6 months, however. The information I have, I don't want to go further than that, is that a clock has been placed on this. It must be resolved within this year, early next year, and then things are going to deteriorate significantly.
Who in Congress is supporting you? Who can you name?
I don't want to really go into, let them speak for themselves. When I take meetings, I take them, if they're confidential, they're confidential. I'm not important in this. It's not supporting me. I'm 68. I was 34 when I started on this path. I've doubled my age. I'm not going to live another 30 years probably. So, my point is I want to be a means to get the intelligence, the information, put the coalition together to move this forward. And I think it's going to need, but the members of Congress who have come forward about this already, such as Congressman Tim Burchett of Tennessee, who has called for these open hearings. He's on the House Government Reform and Oversight Committee. There are many members of Congress who are awakening to this problem. The issue is they're moving much too slowly. You need to contact these members of Congress and also the White House and the Office of the President and say this needs to be dealt with expeditiously because they now have in their possession the entire Disclosure Project Intelligence Archive. And what I have to say about that is no more excuses. No more excuses. They have everything they need.
Dr. Greer, as a special operations, back over here, your left. There we go.
There you are.
Yeah. First and foremost, thank you for everything you do. We appreciate that. My name is Justin Wilson. I'm a former special operations operator, and I currently own a media company called Praetorian. Two-part question. The first one being, is there no hostility from another species because there's a higher governing species, or is it just the fact that there is no hostility whatsoever? How can we be sure of that? First question.
Everybody who I know who has dealt directly with those beings have told me our own experience, and that is they are completely non-hostile. They have been portrayed as such because how do you unite the world around a military response? You create a false alien threat. This is what Wernher von Braun warned about, and we are very much at that point, unfortunately. So I think that calmer minds need to prevail, but there is no evidence they are hostile. Now let me make one other point. As I said one time to a general, I won't say who it is, because if they were hostile, and given the galactically foolish things we have done, targeting them, striking them, now these systems that are faster than the speed of light, moving out into space, The technologies they have, in a fraction of a second, could shut down all those systems and everything else. They have not. Why have they not done that? Because they are essentially very peaceful, highly organized, socially evolved, psychologically and emotionally evolved civilizations. One other point, common sense. If you possess those sort of weapons and you're still of the consciousness of violence, you're going to blow yourself up or some nearby planet with you. Because we're not talking about, let's forget science fiction. You're not talking about boom, boom with a laser beam, right, or a kinetic missile, or even a thermonuclear missile. You're talking being able to affect the fabric of space-time. And then if those technologies are weaponized, it's over in a fraction of a second. So the proof, I said to one senior military guy, that they are not hostile is that you and I are still breathing the free air of Earth. If you know what we've been doing, it's quite clear that this is actually proof that they're not hostile. If you understand what those technologies are, and if you understand what covert illegal projects have been doing.
So here's a question. If there's not any, intervention by the aliens or the people, there is this power and there's people in control. If we don't fix this ourselves, is there going to be any kind of intervention from up there if we continue to destroy the Earth as we are?
Well, that's what I spoke to a moment ago. I think that there are two clocks ticking. One is operations within the constitutional government of the United States that are not going to put up with this any further, more than another 6 to 9 months. The other is the fact that these extraterrestrial civilizations cannot afford for this progression of technology being deployed against them. These have been, much of it's been reverse engineered from the ET vehicles, right? And so at a certain point, where do they have to do something to protect other places? Because there's a universal principle of self-defense. So far, we've just been cruising along, getting away with this foolish and childish behavior. But I can't give you a timeline on that, but I think that, I honestly, from what I've heard from very senior intelligence sources inside the so-called illegal operations, is that it's thought that it would not be able to go on beyond 2026. So maybe within 3 years. Yes?
What do you anticipate will be the response from governments and military people when they learn they can lie?
Well, I think that at first there's denial, shock. It's like the stages of death, frankly. But I know the people that I've been with in the last year and a half and providing this information, which they've then confirmed, it has been an existential crisis for them psychologically, organizationally, et cetera. I won't say who I've been doing this with, but it is traumatic. One of the chief folks, he started working with us on this. He asked me to give them everything we had. I did. Very senior intelligence person. And, he had 2 Black Hawks over his house, shaking his house with his kids in it the next day, with just hovering there, very threatening. This is a very courageous man, a hero of the country who is unnamed. But what I'm saying is that it's going to be a process because there's so much to know, and it's so shocking. And I think most people in the media and in government cannot believe what Senator Inouye knew in 1987 and confirmed to Mr. Garcia in 2001. And I think that you want to sort of go into denial, this just can't be. I did have someone years ago who was a member of the Canadian military say, this is the hottest potato in the universe. Nobody wants to deal with it. And this is another problem. It's easier just to go, this is too difficult, too dangerous. I'm just going to pay attention to what the next tax bill is or whatever it is. And I understand that. I mean, honestly, I sometimes wish I'd never found out what I did about this issue. I got kind of dragged into getting involved at this level, and I never thought I would have to. In my naivete as a young doctor, I thought, well, you tell the right people this, you provide the evidence, and they fix it. But, and they should have. They should But I think at this point, it just becomes very difficult for them. And this is why what we're trying to do, if we can get some help from guys here and listening, is that we need someone who's a very good data scientist and data file person to take this entire archive, finish it. Only part of it's been scanned in. We have enormous amount yet to do. And so it can be organized, and then I would do briefing modules, maybe, I don't know, a dozen, 20 of them, that would connect all that evidence and testimony into intelligence assessments. Now, I've done a number of these. You know, back in the day, I provided intelligence assessments to folks because ultimately the comprehensive assessment based on multiple terabytes of data, hundreds of witness testimonies, thousands of government documents, that has to be put together in something sensible. But that's a very heavy lift, by the way. But I think that's what we need to do so that if you're the national security advisor or the president or chairman of a committee or their members, that they can go from understanding it in a methodical way because it's so much to unpack and it's so overwhelming. But that's just something I haven't had time to do. On my free time, we'll work on it together. Yes. Dr. Greer. Yes.
Thank you very much. I understand your proposition of benevolence. I'd like to follow up a little bit what the gentleman over there said about hostile intention, one of intention of our EBs. Have you ever had any information or relate to you towards genetic manipulation of the species that had been ongoing or previously talked about, which would, of course, construe a national security threat to the Republic? Has any of that ever come your way?
Well, I've certainly heard about it, but what I've heard is the reverse, that our classified projects have taken genetic material and altered it for various purposes, including cloning projects and these program life forms. So in reality, it's probably flown the other way from the folks I've heard. Look, I've been told we have to be out of here at 5. I thank you for your patience. I know we went over about an hour, but help us if you can, and God bless all of you. We'll see you soon.